What happens when the most powerful wolf in the north discovers the woman he destroyed was carrying the one thing that could save his dying bloodline? Tonight, you're about to witness an Omega healer's world shatter under the throne room's cold lights, while a secret grows in her belly that will either unite the wolf clans or burn them all to ash. This is the story of Selena Vale, a woman who learned that survival means becoming the very thing that once broke you. Stay until the end because this first betrayal is only the beginning. And if this hits different, smash that like and drop your city in the comments so I know my pack is watching. The fortress smelled like snow and smoke and something darker, something that crawled up from the stone itself and wrapped around Selena's throat until she could barely breathe. She stood at the edge of the throne room with her hands clasped in front of her belly, fingers laced so tight her knuckles went white. The moonbond ceremony should have been the night she told him. Should have been the night Darius finally looked at her like she was more than a political arrangement, more than warm flesh in his bed when winter bit too hard at the palace walls. But the air was wrong. She could feel it in the way the court wolves watched her, their eyes sliding away when she tried to meet them. Could feel it in the silence that pressed down from the vaulted ceiling, thick as storm clouds before lightning splits the sky. Darius Thorne sat on the obsidian throne like he was carved from the same black rock. 6 feet 4 inches of controlled violence wrapped in ceremonial armor, dark hair pulled back so his face was all brutal angles and that scar cutting through his left eyebrow like a signature. His gray eyes hadn't found her once since she entered the hall. That should have been the first warning. Selena's wolf stirred, restless inside her chest, whining soft and anxious. 3 months along, and she could already feel the difference. The way her senses sharpened and dulled in strange rhythms. The way her body was becoming something both hers and not hers. She pressed one hand flat against her stomach through the ceremonial gown they'd dressed her in, silver silk that pooled around her feet and made her feel like she was drowning. The High Elder stepped forward, his staff clicking against stone. He was ancient, this wolf, old enough to remember when the Northern Kingdom was just scattered packs fighting over frozen ground and rabbit bones. We gather under the full moon to witness the bond between Alpha King Darius Thorne and Omega Selena Vale. His voice echoed. A union blessed by the ancestors, sealed by moon and blood. Selena's pulse jumped. This was it. After tonight, after the ceremony bound them in front of the entire court, she could tell him, could watch his face when she said the words, could finally stop carrying this secret alone. But Darius stood. The movement was sudden, final. He descended the throne steps with that predator's grace that made weaker wolves bare their throats without thinking. When he reached the center of the hall, he didn't look at her, looked instead at Cassian Riker, his beta commander, who stood in full military dress with his hand resting on his sword hilt like he was expecting a fight. Bring it forward, Darius said. Cassian's mouth curved. Not quite a smile. Something colder. He gestured and 2 guards stepped from the shadows carrying a wooden chest between them. They set it down in front of the throne with a heavy thud that Selena felt in her bones. The High Elder's expression shifted, confusion creasing his weathered face. Your Majesty, this is not part of the ceremony. Open it. The guards obeyed. The chest lid swung back and Selena saw papers inside, scrolls and letters bound with red cord. Official seals. The kind used for communications between packs, the kind that could start wars or end them. Darius finally looked at her. The impact of his gaze hit like a fist. Cold. So cold she actually stepped back, her wolf whimpering and pressing low in submission even as her human mind screamed that this was wrong. All of this was wrong. 3 weeks ago, Darius said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, our eastern border was attacked, 12 wolves dead. Supply lines burned. The Shadow Fang pack knew exactly where to strike, exactly when our patrols would be weakest. Selena's heart stopped. No. Someone gave them our defense positions. Someone with access to the war room, to my private councils. He gestured toward the chest. We found the proof yesterday. The air left her lungs. She shook her head, hands coming up like she could physically push away what was happening. Darius, I would never... Your handwriting. Cassian stepped forward, pulling a letter from the chest. He held it up and Selena saw her own script, the way she looped her letters, the signature at the bottom that looked exactly like hers. Detailed maps, guard rotations, signed and sealed and sent to our enemies. That's not mine, her voice cracked. Someone forged it. We had it verified. Darius's tone was flat, emptied of everything that had ever existed between them. Every night he'd pulled her close in the darkness. Every rare morning she'd watched him sleep and let herself believe he might love her. Gone. 3 separate analysts confirmed the writing matches yours perfectly. The court pressed closer, a circle of watching eyes and bared teeth. Selena felt their judgment like teeth in her skin. Traitor. The word hadn't been spoken, but it filled the space anyway, heavy as iron. I'm your wife, she whispered. In title only. Darius pulled something from his belt. Papers. She recognized the royal seal, the heavy parchment used for official decrees. I never wanted this marriage, Selena. You were chosen by the council because they thought an Omega healer would make me look merciful, soften my image for the lower packs. Each word landed like a blade. She tried to speak, but her throat had closed. You have been useful, he continued. Your healing abilities helped injured soldiers. Your presence at court satisfied the old traditions, but I will not keep a traitor in my bed. I will not risk my kingdom for sentiment. He held out the papers. Divorce decree. The word swam in her vision, but she saw enough. Dissolution of marriage. Effective immediately, signed with his mark, witnessed by Cassian and 2 other court officials. Take it, Darius said. Selena's hand shook so badly she almost dropped the parchment. The paper felt like ice against her palms. You don't mean this. You can't. We're bonded. The ceremony was never completed. The High Elder's voice was soft with something that might have been pity. Until the final vows are spoken and the blood oath taken, the bond remains incomplete. Legally, His Majesty has the right to dissolve the arrangement. The floor tilted. Selena locked her knees to keep from falling. 3 months she'd been carrying his child. 3 months of morning sickness swallowed in silence, of hiding her changing scent with herbs and careful avoidance. 3 months of planning how to tell him, imagining his reaction, hoping against hope that maybe this would change things between them. I didn't betray you, she forced the words out. I swear on my wolf, on the moon itself, I never gave information to the Shadowfang pack. Then explained the letters. I can't. Tears burned hot behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these wolves who already saw her as weak. But I know I didn't write them. Someone set me up. Someone wanted you to think, enough. Darius's voice cracked like a whip. I don't have time for desperate lies. The Shadowfang attack was the 3rd this month. The Iron Ridge pack is mobilizing on our northern border. The entire kingdom is watching to see if I'm strong enough to hold the throne my father left me. He stepped closer, and Selena smelled smoke and leather, and that wild scent that used to make her wolf settle content. Now it just made her stomach turn. I cannot appear weak. I cannot have wolves questioning my judgment, and I will not defend you when the evidence is this clear. Your Majesty. A new voice cut through. Cassian again, his expression carefully neutral. Perhaps we should discuss the matter of punishment. Treason against the crown typically demands no execution. Darius's jaw tightened. She heals wolves. That skill is rare enough to warrant mercy. Mercy. The word tasted like poison. Exile then, Cassian said. Strip her of rank and title. Send her to the borderlands where she can't do further damage. The court murmured approval. Selena looked around the hall, searching for one face that might show doubt, one wolf who might question this. But they all watched with the same cold certainty, some satisfied, some merely indifferent, none willing to stand against their alpha king. Her hand moved to her stomach again, protective and unconscious. She had to tell him, had to make him understand what he was throwing away. Darius, please, I need to speak with you, alone. Just 5 minutes. Guards! 2 massive wolves stepped forward, their hands closing around her arms. Selena tried to pull away, but their grip was iron. Wait! The word came out sharp, desperate. You don't understand. Remove her from the palace. Darius turned his back, climbed the steps to his throne, and sat down like she'd already stopped existing. She has until dawn to leave the capital. After that, Any wolf who gives her shelter will be considered complicit in her crimes. No, this couldn't be happening. Selena struggled against the guards, but they were twice her size, trained warriors who'd probably helped burn villages and break rebellions. Her wolf snarled and snapped inside her chest, but she was Omega, built for healing and gentleness, not for fighting alpha-bred soldiers. "You'll regret this," she said, and her voice came out stronger than she felt. "When you learn the truth, when you realize what you've done." "I already know the truth." Darius still wouldn't look at her. "You betrayed me. You chose our enemies over your own pack. Whatever we had, whatever I might have felt, it's dead now." The guards dragged her backward. Selena's feet scraped against stone as she fought to stay upright, to maintain some shred of dignity even as her world collapsed. The court parted like water, wolves pressing back to avoid contamination from the traitor Omega. She caught Cassian's eyes as she passed, just for a second, and she saw it there, buried under the careful mask of duty and righteousness. Satisfaction. He did this. Somehow, some way, Cassian Riker had orchestrated this entire nightmare. The forged letters, the convenient timing, the watertight evidence that left no room for doubt. He'd set the trap and she'd walked right into it without even seeing the jaws closing. But why? The question burned in her mind as the guards hauled her through the palace corridors, past tapestries showing the Thorne family bloodline stretching back generations, past weapons mounted on walls and trophies from defeated packs. Everything Darius had inherited from his brutal father, everything he'd spent 5 years defending and expanding, everything she was being ripped away from. They threw her into her chambers and locked the door from the outside. Selena stood in the center of the room that had been hers for 2 years, looking at the bed where Darius had touched her with something close to tenderness on the rare nights his walls came down. The small desk where she'd written letters to her sister in the Southern Territories. The wardrobe full of gowns she'd never wanted but wore anyway because that's what queen consorts did. Her legs gave out. Selena sank to the floor, both hands pressed tight against her stomach now. The baby was barely there, just a flutter of awareness and potential. But she felt it. Felt the tiny spark of life that had rooted itself inside her body without permission, without warning. Darius's child. The heir he didn't know existed. The only thing that might have saved her if she'd been able to speak fast enough, loud enough to make him listen. A sob tore out of her throat. Then another. She curled forward and let the tears come, hot and angry and full of grief for the future she'd been stupid enough to imagine. She'd known better. Had known from the start that Darius didn't love her, that their marriage was politics and bloodline preservation and nothing more. But somewhere along the way she'd let herself hope. And hope was the most dangerous thing an Omega could carry. The door opened. Selena's head snapped up, heart leaping because maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe he'd realized, but it was just a servant. Young wolf, maybe 18, with nervous hands and eyes that wouldn't meet hers. "I'm to help you pack, my lady. You're permitted 1 bag." 1 bag. 2 years of life reduced to whatever she could carry in a single travel pack. Selena wiped her face and stood. Her wolf had gone quiet, withdrawn so deep she could barely feel it anymore. Protective instinct, maybe. Saving strength for what came next. She packed quickly, mechanically. Practical clothing, her healing supplies, the few personal items that mattered. A carved wooden wolf her sister had given her. The silver bracelet that had belonged to her mother. At the bottom of the wardrobe, hidden under folded blankets, she found the small leather journal where she'd been documenting her pregnancy. Symptoms. Changes. The date she'd first suspected. She held it for a long moment, then packed it too. "They're waiting," the servant whispered. Selena shouldered the bag and walked out of her chambers for the last time. The guards were already there, 4 of them now, like she was dangerous enough to need extra security. They fell in around her without speaking, and the march began. Through the palace. Down the main stairs where just hours ago she'd climbed up in ceremonial silk thinking tonight would change everything. Out into the courtyard where snow had started falling, fat flakes that melted on her skin and made her shiver. A horse waited. Not even a carriage. Just a single mare with supplies strapped to its saddle. "The North Road will take you to the borderlands," one guard said. Not unkind, but not sympathetic either. Just stating facts. "Stay off the main paths. Most packs have been notified of your exile. They won't help you." "How generous," Selena muttered. She mounted the horse, awkward with the bag and her emotional exhaustion. The guard stepped back. The palace gate stood open, iron teeth against the night sky. Selina looked back once. The fortress rose behind her, all stone and power and ancient violence. Somewhere in there, Darius sat on his throne and believed he'd done the right thing, believed she'd betrayed him, believed the evidence because questioning it would mean questioning his beta, his systems, his own judgment. She pressed her hand to her stomach one more time. "I won't let you grow up here," she whispered. "Won't let you learn his cruelty. Won't let you think love looks like this." Then she turned the horse north and rode into the darkness. The forest swallowed her within minutes. The North Road was barely a road at all, just a track worn through trees by travelers desperate or foolish enough to risk the borderlands. Selina had heard stories about what lived out here. Rogue wolves who'd rejected pack law, feral things that used to be human, the bitter cold that could freeze flesh in minutes if you weren't careful. She didn't care. Let the forest take her. Let the rogues find her. At least she'd die knowing she never betrayed the wolf she'd been stupid enough to love. The snow fell harder. Selina pulled her cloak tight and kept riding, her wolf finally stirring to help regulate her body temperature. Hours passed. The moon climbed higher, full and merciless and beautiful. Moonbond ceremony. That's what tonight was supposed to be. Instead, it was the night she learned exactly how little she'd ever mattered. Sometime around midnight, the horse stumbled. Selina dismounted and checked its leg, found the hoof packed with ice. She cleared it carefully, her healer instincts taking over even now. The mare nuzzled her shoulder in gratitude. "We're both refugees now," Selina said softly. A branch cracked behind her. Selina spun, heart hammering. The forest pressed close on all sides, shadows thick between the trees. She couldn't see anything, but she felt it. The weight of being watched. "I know you're there," she called out. "I'm not here to cause trouble, just passing through." Silence. Then a low growl that raised every hair on her neck. 3 wolves stepped from the darkness. Not shifted, still in their human forms, but she could see their eyes reflecting moonlight. Rogues. Had to be. No pack scent, no formal structure, just predators who'd found prey alone in their territory. The biggest one grinned, showing too many teeth. "Look what the north wind brought us. A pretty little omega all by herself." Selina's hand went to the knife at her belt. Small blade meant for cutting herbs and bandages, useless against 3 grown wolves. "I'm exiled," she said, keeping her voice steady. "No pack affiliation. I'm not worth the trouble. Maybe. But that cloak looks warm, and that horse would feed us for a week." The rogue circled closer. "What do you think, boys? Should we let her go?" The other 2 laughed. Selina's wolf finally surged up, flooding her system with adrenaline. She couldn't fight them, but maybe she could run. Maybe if she shifted fast enough. No, the baby. She didn't know what shifting would do this early in pregnancy. Didn't know if the transformation would hurt the tiny life inside her. So she stood her ground. "Touch me and you'll regret it," Selina said. "I'm a healer. That means I know exactly where to cut to make death slow." The big rogue paused. Bold words for an omega. "Try me." For a long moment, nobody moved. Selina felt her pulse in her throat, her palms slick with sweat despite the cold. This was it. This was how she died. Torn apart by rogues in the frozen forest while carrying the heir to the northern kingdom. The irony would have been funny if she wasn't so terrified. Then a new voice cut through the night. "I suggest you move along, gentlemen." Everyone turned. An old woman stood at the edge of the clearing, leaning on a gnarled walking stick. She was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, wrapped in furs and wool until she looked like a bundle of rags given human shape. But her eyes were sharp. Wolf eyes, ancient and knowing. The big rogue snarled, "This isn't your business, crone." Perhaps. But that girl is under my protection now. And I'm too old to have patience for wolves who prey on pregnant omegas. Selina's breath caught. How did she... The old woman smiled. "I can smell it on her. 3 months along, give or take. Carrying strong bloodline, too, unless I miss my guess." She looked at the rogues. "So you can leave peacefully, or I can show you why the borderland packs fear the name Mara Frost." The rogues exchanged glances, then, incredibly, they backed down, melted into the forest like they'd never been there at all. Selina stared. "Who are you?" Someone who knows what it's like to run from wolves who should have protected you. Mara gestured with her stick. Come, my village is an hour's walk east. You need food and rest, and that baby needs you alive. Every instinct screamed not to trust this. Strange wolves offering shelter always had a price, but Selena was out of options. She took the horse's reins and followed Mara into the darkness, toward whatever came next. Because one thing was certain now. She would survive this. And when her child was born, when the tiny spark inside her grew into something strong and whole, she would make sure Darius Thorne learned exactly what he'd thrown away the night he chose pride over truth. The forest closed behind them like a door slamming shut on everything Selena had been. Ahead, somewhere at the frozen borderlands, a new life waited. And in the palace she'd left behind, in the throne room still smelling of ceremony and snow, Cassian Riker stood beside his king and smiled. The village appeared like something out of a half-remembered dream, tucked into a valley where the mountains created a natural fortress against the worst of the northern winds. Selena counted maybe 40 structures, most of them built low to the ground with stone foundations and timber roofs weighted down with rocks. Smoke rose from chimneys in thin gray streams that the wind grabbed and scattered. Mara led her through narrow paths between buildings, past wolves who stopped their work to stare. Selena felt their eyes tracking her, measuring. Most were older, scarred, the kind of wolves who'd seen enough violence to recognize it in others. A few were younger but carried themselves with that wary stillness that came from growing up in places where safety was never guaranteed. No children, though. That registered somewhere in Selena's exhausted brain, not a single young voice breaking the quiet. The old woman's house sat at the far edge of the settlement, built against the mountain itself so that half the structure was carved directly into rock. Mara pushed open the door and warmth spilled out. The smell of herbs and wood smoke and something cooking that made Selena's stomach clench with sudden hunger. How long since she'd eaten? The ceremony had been at dusk. She'd been too nervous to touch the formal dinner beforehand. That meant at least 12 hours, maybe more. Inside, the house was larger than it looked from outside. One main room with a stone fireplace, shelves packed with dried plants and glass jars full of things Selena didn't recognize, a table scarred with knife marks and age. A narrow doorway led to what looked like a sleeping area. Mara gestured to a chair near the fire. Selena sat because her legs were shaking and she didn't trust them anymore. The old woman moved around the space with practiced efficiency, ladling soup from a pot hanging over the flames, cutting thick slices of dark bread, pouring water from a clay pitcher. She set the food in front of Selena without comment. For a moment, Selena just stared at it. Then her body took over and she ate, shoving soup and bread into her mouth so fast she barely tasted it. The warmth hit her stomach, and she felt her wolf finally settle, some animal panic easing now that there was food and heat and four walls between her and the frozen forest. Mara sat across from her and waited. When Selena finally slowed down, when she could breathe without her chest hitching, the old woman spoke. "You're the one they're calling traitor." Not a question. Selena set down her spoon. News travels fast. In the borderlands, information is currency. A rider came through 2 hours before you arrived, spreading word that the Alpha King's wife had been exiled for treason, that any pack giving you shelter would face his wrath. Mara's expression didn't change. Most wolves out here don't care much about royal threats, but they care about survival, about not drawing attention from armies that could wipe out a village like this in an afternoon. Selena's throat tightened. Then why help me? Because I know what it's like to be thrown away by wolves who claim to love you. Because I've buried too many Omegas who died alone in the snow carrying babies their alphas didn't want. The old woman's eyes were hard. And because that child you're carrying has a bloodline strong enough that I can smell it through your fear. That's not common stock. That's royalty. There was no point lying. Selena met her gaze. It's his, Darius's. I found out 3 months ago. Was going to tell him the night of the ceremony. But he divorced you first. He thinks I betrayed him. Someone forged evidence, made it look like I sold information to enemy packs. Selena's hands curled into fists on the table. I didn't. I would never. But he didn't even question it. Just signed the papers and had me thrown out like garbage. Mara was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and gripped Selena's wrist. Her fingers were strong, calloused from decades of work. Listen to me carefully. What happens next will define whether you survive this or break. You have two choices. You can spend your energy trying to prove your innocence, trying to win back a wolf who already decided you were disposable. Or you can accept that the girl who walked into that palace 2 years ago is dead, and the woman sitting in my kitchen needs to become something harder if she wants to keep that baby alive. The words landed like blows. Selena tried to pull away, but Mara's grip tightened. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm not saying you deserved this. But fair doesn't keep you warm when winter comes. Fair doesn't feed a newborn when you're bleeding out from childbirth with no pack to support you. The old woman leaned closer. You want justice? You want revenge? Fine. But first you survive. First you get strong enough that when he realizes his mistake, you're not some broken thing crawling back. You're a wolf he can't touch. Selena's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to cry again. She was so tired of crying. I don't know how to be that. Then you learn. Mara released her wrist and sat back. This village exists because wolves like us figured out how to be useful, how to offer something the borderlands need. You're a healer. That's rare, valuable, especially out here where most injuries mean death because there's no one with the skill to prevent it. You want me to work. I want you to earn your place, same as everyone else. Mara's tone was matter-of-fact. You heal the wolves who come through here. You teach the younger ones what you know, and in exchange, we make sure you and that baby have food, shelter, and protection. It was transactional, cold, nothing like the soft life Selena had lived in the palace, where servants brought her meals, and all she had to do was look pretty and heal the occasional soldier. But it was honest, and honestly felt like the first solid thing she'd touched since the throne room floor tilted under her feet. Okay, Selena said. I'll work. Mara smiled, small and sharp. Good. You can start tomorrow. Tonight, you sleep. The back room is yours. Selena stood, every muscle screaming. She made it 3 steps toward the doorway before her legs gave out. Mara caught her, surprisingly strong for someone so small, and half carried her the rest of the way. The sleeping area was simple. A bed with furs piled on top, a small trunk, a window that looked out at the mountain. Selena collapsed onto the mattress, and Mara pulled the furs up around her. One more thing, the old woman said quietly. That baby's bloodline. It's not just royal, it's old. Ancient wolf, the kind that shows up maybe once every few generations. I don't know what it means yet, but I know wolves with that kind of power either unite the packs or tear them apart. Selena's hand found her stomach. How can you tell? Because I've been alive long enough to recognize destiny when it kicks me in the teeth. Mara moved toward the door. Sleep. We'll talk more when you're not half dead. She left, pulling the door closed behind her. Selena lay in the darkness and felt the baby flutter inside her. Barely there, just potential wrapped in cells and blood, but already changing everything. She thought about Darius sitting on his throne, thought about Cassian's satisfied smile, thought about the court wolves who'd watched her dragged away without a single voice raised in her defense. And she felt something shift inside her chest, something cold and sharp and permanent. Mara was right. The girl who'd loved Darius Thorne, who'd believed in the possibility of his redemption, who'd tried so hard to be gentle enough that he might eventually be gentle back. That girl was gone. What grew in her place didn't have a name yet, but it had teeth. Selena closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under. She woke to voices outside. Male, aggressive. Selena sat up fast, her wolf surging alert, and stumbled to the window. 3 wolves stood in the village center, all wearing the black and silver colors of the Northern Kingdom's military. Royal Guards. One held a scroll, reading from it in a voice loud enough to carry. By order of Alpha King Darius Thorne, the Omega known as Selena Vale is declared enemy of the crown. Any pack or individual providing her shelter, aid, or comfort will be considered complicit in treason and subject to immediate prosecution. The village wolves had gathered in a loose circle, their faces carefully blank. Selena recognized that look. The emptiness that came from living in places where showing emotion could get you killed. Mara stood at the front, leaning on her walking stick. The guard with the scroll looked directly at her. We have reports she was seen heading north on this route. If she's here, turn her over now, and the village will face no consequences. And if she's not here, Mara's voice was mild, then you won't mind if we search. The old woman smiled. I absolutely mind. This is free territory. Your king's authority ends at the borderlands. The guard's expression hardened. The Alpha King's authority extends wherever he says it does. Is that so? Mara shifted her weight, and Selena saw the way the other village wolves tensed, saw hands moving toward weapons that weren't visible but were definitely there. Then perhaps you should tell your king that the borderlands have their own rules. And one of those rules is that royal soldiers who make threats tend to disappear into the mountains and never come back. The three guards exchanged glances. They were outnumbered 15-3, standing in hostile territory surrounded by wolves who looked like they'd spent their whole lives learning creative ways to kill. Smart Money said retreat. The lead guard rolled up his scroll. We'll be reporting this conversation to His Majesty. You do that. Mara's smile widened. And while you're at it, tell him Mara Frost says hello. See if he remembers what happened the last time he sent soldiers into my territory. The guards left fast, disappearing down the mountain path like the forest was chasing them. Selena pressed her forehead against the cold window glass. Her heart was hammering so hard she felt sick. They'd come for her. Less than 12 hours after her exile, and Darius had already sent soldiers to make sure she couldn't find refuge anywhere. Why? If he wanted her gone, why not just let her disappear? Unless it wasn't about her at all. Unless this was about making an example, showing the other packs what happened to wolves who crossed the Alpha King, proving his strength by hunting down the wife he'd discarded. The cruelty of it hit her like a fist. She'd known Darius was hard, had watched him pass judgment on wolves who'd broken pack law, had seen him lead soldiers into battle and come back covered in blood. But she'd told herself there was something underneath the brutality, some core of him that was capable of softness if she could just reach it. She'd been wrong, and now she was carrying the child of a wolf who would rather see her dead than admit he might have made a mistake. The door opened. Mara came in without knocking, her expression grim. You heard? Selena nodded, not trusting her voice. He's not going to stop. You understand that, right? Whatever you meant to him, it's gone now. You're a threat to his authority, a loose end, and wolves like Darius Thorne don't leave loose ends. I know. Good. Mara moved to the window and looked out at the village. Then you also need to know what staying here means. Those guards will report back. The king will hear that we refuse to turn you over, and eventually he'll decide whether hunting you is worth the cost of starting a war with the borderlands. Guilt twisted in Selena's gut. I can leave. I won't put your people at risk. Sit down before you fall down. Mara's tone was sharp. I didn't take you in to throw you back out at the first sign of trouble. But you need to understand the stakes, need to be ready for what comes next. Selena sat on the edge of the bed. What does come next? Training, work, survival. The old woman crossed her arms. And you start today. There's a wolf in the eastern hut who took an arrow 2 days ago. Infection's setting in. If you can save him, the village sees you're useful. If he dies, well, we tried. It was brutal calculus, life or death as a job interview. Selena stood. Show me. The eastern hut smelled like rot and sweat, and the particular sweetness that meant flesh was dying. The wolf inside was maybe 30, lying on a pallet with his torso wrapped in bloody bandages. His skin had the gray tint that came before fever took over completely. 2 other wolves sat with him. A woman holding his hand, her face tight with fear. A younger male who looked up when Selena entered, his eyes hostile. Who's this? The healer I told you about. Mara gestured to Selena. She's going to try to save Marcus. The younger wolf stood. We don't need some palace soft paw touching him. She probably doesn't even know how to treat a real wound. Selena ignored him and moved to the pallet. She knelt, her hands already assessing. The bandages were soaked through, the smell stronger up close. Infection had definitely set in. The question was how deep. She looked at the woman. How long since the arrow came out? 2 days. We got most of it, but the head broke off. There's still metal inside. The woman's voice shook. Mara tried, but her hands aren't steady enough for surgery anymore. I need clean water, boiled if possible, cloth for new bandages, and something for him to bite down on. The younger wolf didn't move. You think you can just walk in here and... Kyle, the woman's voice cut through. Get the water, now. He left, jaw tight with anger. Selena carefully unwrapped the bandages, revealing the wound. Entry point below the ribs, angled up. The flesh around it was swollen, red streaks spreading out that meant the infection was moving into his bloodstream. She had maybe 6 hours before it killed him. Selena closed her eyes and let her wolf rise to the surface. Her healing ability had always been instinctive, something she felt more than understood. A warmth that spread from her core through her hands, a sense of where tissue was damaged and how to guide it back toward wholeness. But this was different. The baby changed something, made her awareness sharper, her connection to life more immediate. She could feel Marcus's body fighting the infection, could sense exactly where the arrow fragment was lodged. She opened her eyes. I can get it out, but it's going to hurt and he needs to stay still. If he thrashes, I could nick something vital. Mara had followed her in. Now she moved to Marcus's head and gripped his shoulders. He'll stay still. Kael returned with the water and supplies, slamming them down harder than necessary. Selena washed her hands, then heated her knife blade over the candle flame until it glowed red. Sterilization by fire. Crude, but effective. She looked at the woman. Hold his hand. Talk to him. Keep him focused on your voice. Then she cut. Marcus screamed, the sound tearing out of him even through the leather strap clenched between his teeth. Selena worked fast, her fingers following the path her wolf sense showed her. The arrowhead had lodged against his 10th rib, the metal corroding and poisoning everything around it. She gripped it with the knife tip and pulled. It came free in a gush of pus and blood that made Kael gag and turn away. Selena dropped the fragment into a bowl and immediately placed both hands over the wound. Heat flowed from her palms, that healing warmth that felt like sunlight concentrated into pure intent. The flesh began to knit. Slowly. Too slowly. She was tired, stressed, her body already working to sustain the pregnancy. The healing took more effort than it should have. But it worked. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, the wound had closed enough that infection couldn't spread further. Selena wrapped it with clean bandages and sat back, dizzy from the effort. Marcus was unconscious, but breathing steady. The gray tint was fading from his skin. The woman looked at her with tears streaming down her face. You saved him. Maybe. He's not out of danger yet. I need to check him every few hours, make sure the infection doesn't come back. Selena stood, swaying. Mara caught her elbow. You did good. Kael was staring at her now, the hostility replaced by something more complicated. I've never seen healing like that. The speed of it. I've had practice. Selena moved toward the door, needing air, needing space to breathe without the smell of sickness filling her lungs. Outside, the sun had climbed higher. Late morning, the village was coming to life. Wolves emerging from their homes to tend gardens or repair tools or stand guard at the perimeter. News had already spread. Selena felt their eyes on her as she walked back toward Mara's house, measuring, reassessing. She'd proven herself useful. That bought her time, bought her safety, but it also made her valuable, and valuable things attracted attention. That night, Selena lay in bed and felt the baby move for the first time. Just a flutter, barely there, but real, undeniable. She spread her hand over her stomach and whispered into the darkness. I don't know what I'm doing. Don't know how to protect you or raise you or give you the life you deserve, but I know this. You're mine. Not his. Not the kingdom's, mine. And I will burn down every wolf who tries to take you from me. The baby kicked again, stronger this time. Selena closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under. 3 weeks passed. Selena fell into a rhythm. She woke before dawn and checked on Marcus, whose wound healed clean without complication. She treated other injuries as wolves came through. Broken bones from mining accidents, infections from untreated cuts, a young girl who'd been mauled by a feral bear and needed extensive tissue repair. Word spread through the borderlands. The exiled queen was a healer worth the journey. Wolves started arriving from other villages, some traveling for days to reach her. Mara watched with satisfaction. You're making yourself indispensable, that's smart. Selena learned the other villagers' names. Kael, who'd been hostile at first but now watched her work with grudging respect. His sister Reyna, the woman who'd been holding Marcus's hand. An old warrior named Torin, who'd lost his leg in some long-ago battle and now served as the village's unofficial historian. A dozen others, each with their own scars and survival stories. None of them asked about the baby growing inside her, but they knew. She could see it in the way they made sure she ate enough, the way Reyna started leaving extra furs on her bed as the nights grew colder. The borderlands took care of their own, and somehow, without meaning to, Selena had become one of them. She was treating a sprained ankle on a young wolf named Bryn when the runner arrived. Male, maybe 20, moving so fast he was panting when he reached the village center. "Raiders," he gasped. "Iron Ridge Pack. They hit Clearwater Settlement 2 hours north, killed 8 wolves, took the rest as slaves." The village went still. Selena looked up from Bryn's ankle, her stomach clenching. Mara stepped forward. "How many raiders?" 20, maybe more. They're moving south, hitting every settlement they find." The runner wiped sweat from his face. Clearwater didn't stand a chance. They weren't warriors, just farmers and craftsmen, like this village. Selena looked around at the wolves she'd been living with. Most were old or injured or too young. There were maybe 5 who could fight effectively if it came to battle. Kael was already moving, checking weapons. Torin pulled out an old sword and tested its weight with his remaining arm. Mara's expression was grim. "How long until they reach us?" "If they keep their pace, tomorrow, maybe sooner." "Tomorrow." Selena's hand went to her stomach. She was almost 4 months along now, starting to show if anyone looked closely. Running wasn't an option. Fighting wasn't an option. So what the hell were they supposed to do? Reyna appeared at her elbow. "You should hide. If they're taking slaves, they'll definitely take a pregnant Omega healer." The logic was sound. But Selena looked at Marcus, still recovering, at old Torin with his missing leg, at the young wolves who'd just started learning to trust her. If she hid while they died, she'd never forgive herself. "I can fight," she said. Kael laughed, sharp and bitter. "No offense, but you're built for healing, not killing. And you're pregnant. Best thing you can do is stay out of the way." He was right. Selena knew he was right. But something hot and stubborn was rising in her chest, that same feeling that had made her stand up to the rogue wolves in the forest. She was so tired of being dismissed, of being seen as weak, of letting other wolves decide what she was capable of. Mara was watching her with those sharp old eyes. "You have an idea." "Maybe." Selena's mind was racing. Raiders want easy targets. They hit fast, take what they can carry, move on before organized resistance shows up, right? Usually. So we make it not easy. We make them think this village is more trouble than it's worth. Selena looked around at the gathered wolves. We can't beat them in straight combat, but we don't have to. We just have to convince them to choose a different target. Torin grunted. And how do we do that? Traps, ambush points, make them bleed for every step. Selena's wolf was fully present now, lending her a confidence she didn't quite feel. "I've watched Darius plan defensive strategies. I know how raiders think. They're opportunists. Show them teeth, and they'll look for easier prey." Silence. The village wolves exchanged glances. Then Kael nodded slowly. "What do you need?" They worked through the night. Selena directed them, pulling strategies from memories of sitting in Darius's war councils, of watching him move markers across maps and explain why certain positions were vulnerable. She'd absorbed more than she'd realized. They dug pit traps along the main approach, covered them with branches and snow, set tripwires that would bring down logs on anyone who triggered them, positioned archers at high points with clear sight lines. It wasn't much, but it was something. As dawn broke, Selena stood at the village perimeter and looked out at the forest. Somewhere out there, 20 or more wolves were moving south with blood on their hands and hunger in their eyes. And here she was, 4 months pregnant and exhausted, trying to defend a village that wasn't hers with wolves who'd been strangers a month ago. The girl who'd walked out of that palace wouldn't recognize her. Good. Mara appeared beside her. "You know this is insane." "Completely. And you're doing it anyway." "Seems like the only option." Selena glanced at the old woman. "You could evacuate, get the vulnerable ones out before the raiders arrive. And let them burn what we've built? Not a chance." Mara's grip tightened on her walking stick. "Besides, I'm curious to see if that baby of yours inherited its father's tactical mind along with his bloodline." Selena's hand went to her stomach. The baby was quiet today, saving energy maybe, or just too small to understand that its mother was about to do something monumentally stupid. "If this goes wrong, it won't." Mara's tone was flat certainty. "Because you won't let it. That's the difference between surviving and living, girl. Survivors wait for rescue. But you're learning to be the wolf who does the rescuing." Before Selena could respond, a howl echoed through the forest. Close, too close. The raiders had arrived. Selena's heart kicked into overdrive. She looked at Kyle, who'd climbed to the highest roof with a bow. He held up 3 fingers, then 5, then 8. 8 wolves approaching from the south. More than they'd hoped for, less than they'd feared. Positions, Mara called softly. The village wolves melted into cover. Selena crouched behind a stone wall, a knife in each hand even though she had no idea how to use them in real combat. Her wolf was snarling, protective instinct overriding everything else. The first raider stepped into the clearing. He was huge, easily 6.5 feet, wearing furs stained with old blood. The wolves behind him fanned out, weapons ready, eyes scanning for threats. Their leader stopped, looked around at the quiet village. His nostrils flared. "I smell fierce," he called out. "And I smell omegas. Come out now and we'll make this quick. Hide and we'll burn you out." Silence. Then Kyle's arrow took him through the shoulder. The raider howled and his pack surged forward. 2 of them hit the first pit trap and went down screaming, wooden stakes punching through legs and torsos. Another triggered a tripwire and a log swung out of the trees, catching him across the chest with enough force to crack ribs. Chaos erupted. The raiders who'd made it past the traps were looking around wildly, trying to figure out where the attack was coming from. More arrows flew from hidden positions. A raider went down with a shaft through his throat, but they were adapting fast. These weren't mindless berserkers. They were experienced fighters who'd survived by being smart and vicious. Their leader pulled the arrow from his shoulder and pointed at the roof where Kyle crouched. "Kill the archer!" 3 raiders charged the building. Kyle got one more shot off before they reached the base and started climbing. Selena acted without thinking. She left her cover and sprinted toward the building, her wolf flooding her system with strength and speed she didn't know she had. She reached the raiders just as the first one grabbed Kyle's ankle and yanked him off the roof. Kyle hit the ground hard. The raider raised his axe. Selena drove her knife into the back of his knee. The raider screamed and spun, backhanding her across the face with enough force to send her sprawling. Stars exploded in her vision. She tasted blood. But Kyle was up again, his own blade out, and he took the raider's throat before the wolf could finish what he'd started. "I told you to stay hidden," Kyle shouted. "You're welcome." Selena scrambled to her feet, dizzy from the impact. Her face was going to bruise spectacularly. More fighting erupted around them. The village wolves had abandoned the traps and were engaged in close combat now. Selena saw Torin wielding his sword one-handed, old muscle memory making up for the missing limb. Saw Reyna using a hunting spear to drive back 2 raiders at once. But they were losing. The raiders were too strong, too practiced at this kind of violence. And then Selena felt it. A shift in the air, a presence that made every wolf in the clearing freeze. Someone new was coming. Someone whose aura was so powerful it felt like walking into a wall. The trees parted and a wolf stepped into the clearing. Not one of the raiders. This was something else entirely. A male, maybe 40, dressed in dark traveling clothes with a sword strapped to his back. His hair was silver white, unusual for someone his age. And his eyes, Selena's breath caught. Golden. Pure gold. The color of an alpha bloodline so old it predated most of the existing packs. The raider leader took one look at him and went pale. Kai Bloodmoon. The name rippled through the clearing. Even Selena had heard it. Stories told in the palace about a wolf who'd once challenged Darius's father for the northern throne and lost, who'd been exiled and had disappeared into the borderlands 20 years ago. Kai looked at the raiders with the kind of disdain usually reserved for insects. Leave. Just that. One word. The raider leader hesitated, then looked at his remaining wolves, 5 still standing, 3 injured. The math wasn't in his favor. This territory isn't claimed. It is now. Kai's hand moved to his sword hilt. And you have 10 seconds to run before I decide killing you is worth the effort. The raiders ran. They melted into the forest like smoke, leaving their dead and injured behind. Selena watched them go, her heart still hammering, blood dripping from her split lip. The village wolves stared at Kai with a mixture of awe and fear. He turned to Mara. You're getting too old for this. And you're getting too dramatic. But the old woman was smiling. Thank you for the timing. I was passing through. Heard the fighting. Kai's golden eyes swept the clearing, taking inventory of the damage. Then they landed on Selena. She felt the impact of his gaze like a physical thing, felt him assess her in a single heartbeat. The pregnancy, the split lip, the knives still clutched in her hands. His expression changed. Something like recognition. Something like pity. "You're the exiled queen." Not a question. Selena straightened despite the pain, despite the exhaustion. "I'm Selena. And you're carrying Darius Thorne's heir." The clearing went silent. Everyone was staring now. Selena's secret, carefully guarded for 4 months, laid bare in 5 seconds. She lifted her chin. "That's none of your business." Kai's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Actually, it might be, because that child you're carrying has a bloodline I haven't seen in 200 years, the kind that makes kings, or destroys them." Selena's hand went to her stomach, protective and automatic. "What are you talking about? Your baby isn't just royal, it's ancient wolf, direct descendant of the first pack." Kai took a step closer, and Selena had to force herself not to retreat, which means every alpha in the north is going to want to either claim it or kill it. And Darius Thorne? When he finds out what he threw away? The older wolf's expression was almost sympathetic. He's going to tear this world apart trying to get it back. The words hung in the frozen air like smoke that wouldn't dissipate. Ancient wolf, first pack, bloodline strong enough to make kings or destroy them. Selena stood in the village clearing with blood drying on her split lip and her hand pressed protective over her belly, while every wolf within earshot stared at her like she'd just been revealed as something either holy or catastrophic. The distinction didn't seem to matter much. Both would get her killed. Kai Bloodmoon watched her with those unsettling golden eyes, waiting for a reaction she didn't know how to give. Behind him, Mara's expression had gone carefully blank in the way that meant her mind was already 3 moves ahead, calculating what this revelation would cost them. Selena's wolf was snarling, hackles raised, every instinct screaming that exposure meant danger. For 4 months she'd kept this secret locked down tight. 4 months of hiding her changing scent, of deflecting questions, of pretending the baby inside her was just another complication in an already complicated situation. But it had never been simple. She'd known that from the moment she first felt the spark of life take root, had felt the power in it even when it was barely a cluster of cells, something old, something that didn't belong in the modern world of pack politics and territorial disputes. She'd just hoped no one else would notice until she figured out what it meant. Kael was the first to break the silence. He stepped forward, his face still bloody from the fight, suspicion written in every line of his body. "How can you tell?" "About the bloodline." Kai's attention shifted to him. The weight of it made Kael take an involuntary step back. "Because I'm old enough to remember what ancient wolf feels like. Before the packs fractured and diluted themselves fighting over scraps of territory. Before wolves forgot what real power looked like." The silver-haired alpha gestured at Selena without looking away from Kael. "That child is carrying a legacy most wolves think died out centuries ago. The kind that lets an alpha command loyalty without words. The kind that can force submission from wolves 3 times their strength just by existing in the same space." Reyna had moved closer to Selena, her hunting spear still gripped tight. "And that makes the baby what exactly? A weapon?" Kai's expression shifted to something that might have been respect. Potentially. Or a bridge between the fractured packs. Or a target for every alpha who thinks claiming that bloodline will legitimize their grab for power. He finally looked at Selena again. "Which is why you need to leave this village. Tonight." The clearing erupted. Voices overlapping, some arguing for her to stay, others demanding she go before she brought more trouble down on them. Selena heard fragments through the noise. "She saved Marcus. She helped us fight. We can't just throw her out, but she's carrying something that could start a war. The raiders will come back. The king will send more soldiers." Mara's walking stick cracked against stone hard enough to split the wood. The village went silent. The old woman's face was carved from iron. Nobody makes that decision except Selena herself. This is her life, her child. And I didn't drag her half-dead body out of the snow 4 months ago just to let a bunch of panicked wolves tell her where she's allowed to exist. Selena felt something crack in her chest. Not breaking, shifting, making room for a different shape of herself. She'd been running since the night Darius signed those divorce papers. Running from the palace, from the guards, From the future she'd thought she was building. Even here in the village, she'd been running in place, healing wolves, and keeping her head down and trying not to draw attention. But attention had found her anyway. And Kai was right about one thing. Staying here put everyone at risk, not just from raiders or royal soldiers, but from something bigger. Something that would pull in alphas from every territory once word spread about what she was carrying. She looked at Mara, at Kyle and Reyna and old Torin standing at the edge of the crowd with his sword still drawn, at the village that had given her shelter when she had nothing. "I'll leave." Mara's eyes narrowed. "You don't have to, I know. But I won't let you die protecting something that isn't yours to protect." Selena's voice was steady even though her hands were shaking. "You gave me time, gave me space to figure out how to survive. That's more than anyone else offered. Where will you go?" Reyna's question was soft. Selena looked at Kai, the ancient wolf alpha who'd appeared at exactly the right moment to save them from the raiders, who knew things about bloodlines and power that most wolves had forgotten, who watched her now with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You didn't come here by accident." "No." Kai's tone was matter-of-fact. "I've been tracking rumors about the exiled queen for 3 weeks. Wanted to see if they were true. If Darius Thorn really was stupid enough to throw away his bonded mate without verification." "You were looking for me specifically." "I was looking for what you're carrying." The older wolf's jaw tightened. "Because if that baby survives to be born, it changes everything." The balance of power in the north has been stagnant for 2 decades. Packs fighting over the same frozen territory, bleeding themselves dry in conflicts that accomplish nothing. But an ancient wolf heir? That's a catalyst. That's the kind of disruption that either unites the packs or shatters them completely. Selena's hand moved to her stomach again. "And which do you want?" "I want to see what the baby chooses." Kai took a step closer, and this time Selena stood her ground. "But I also want it to live long enough to make that choice, which means keeping you alive, keeping you hidden until the child is strong enough to defend itself. You're offering protection. I'm offering a place to hide where even Darius Thorn won't find you, a location so remote that most wolves think it's a myth." He paused. "But it comes with conditions." "Of course it does." Selena's laugh was bitter. "Nothing in this world is free. The condition is simple. You let me train you, teach you how to fight, how to survive, how to be something more than a healer hiding behind other wolves." Kai's golden eyes were relentless. "Because when that baby is born, you won't have the luxury of being weak. Every alpha in the north will come for you. And if you can't defend yourself, defend your child, then all this is pointless." The words hit like fists, but Selena didn't flinch. She thought about the knife she'd driven into the raider's knee. The desperate sprint across the clearing to save Kael. The way her body had moved without her permission, instinct overriding fear. She'd spent 2 years in the palace being decorative, being soft, being exactly what an Omega was supposed to be in a world that valued strength over everything else. And it had earned her nothing except exile and betrayal. Maybe it was time to become something else. "Okay, I'll go with you." Mara moved to her side. "You're sure about this?" "No, but I'm sure about needing to survive." Selena met the old woman's eyes. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me yet." Mara's expression was grim. "Because if Kai Bloodmoon is getting involved, that means the situation is worse than we thought. Ancient wolves don't come out of hiding for small stakes." Kai's smile was sharp. "Smart woman. They left before dawn." Selena said her goodbyes quickly, unwilling to draw out the pain of it. Reyna hugged her hard enough to crack ribs. Kael pressed a knife into her hands, better quality than the one she'd been using, with a warning to actually learn how to use it properly. Torin just nodded, old soldier respect for someone heading into battle. Mara walked her to the village edge where Kai waited with 2 horses. "You find yourself in trouble. You send word." The old woman's voice was rough. "We're not much, but we're something. And you're packed now, whether you're here or not." Selena's throat closed. She managed a nod. Then she mounted the horse and followed Kai into the pre-dawn darkness, leaving behind the first place that had felt like home since the palace stopped being one. They rode north for 3 days. The landscape changed around them, mountains giving way to deeper forest, then to tundra where the ground was frozen solid and the wind cut like broken glass. Kai set a brutal pace, stopping only when the horses needed rest. He didn't talk much beyond practical instructions about the route and warnings about wolves to avoid. Selena was grateful for the silence. It gave her time to think, time to process everything that had happened since Kai's revelation in the village, time to feel the baby moving inside her, stronger now at almost 5 months. No longer just a flutter, but definite kicks and shifts. On the third night, they made camp in a cave that offered shelter from the worst of the wind. Kai built a fire while Selena tended the horses, her healing sense automatically checking them for injuries or strain. When she came back to the fire, Kai was cooking something that smelled like rabbit. "You're better with animals than most healers I've met." Selena sat across from him, close enough to the flames to feel warmth, but not so close she'd overheat. "It's part of the ability. I can sense what's wrong, what needs fixing. Doesn't matter if it's wolf or horse or anything else with a heartbeat. Useful skill." Kai turned the rabbit on its spit, especially out here where resources are scarce and every asset matters. "Is that what I am to you? An asset?" The golden eyes lifted to meet hers. "You're a pregnant Omega carrying the most powerful bloodline to emerge in 200 years. You're leverage. You're a symbol. You're a weapon, whether you want to be or not. The question isn't what you are to me. It's what you're going to choose to be for yourself." Selena watched the fire pop and hiss. "I keep thinking about that night. The ceremony. How close I came to telling him about the baby before everything fell apart. And now? Now I'm glad I didn't. Because if he'd known, he would have kept me. Not out of love or trust, but because the baby represented power. Control. Another piece on his political chessboard." She looked at Kai. "At least this way the child is mine. Not his, not anyone's but mine." Kai's expression shifted to something almost approving. "That's the first time you've sounded like you believe it." They ate in silence. The rabbit was tough, but edible. Selena forced herself to finish her portion, knowing she needed the protein for the baby, even though exhaustion had killed her appetite. "Can I ask you something?" Kai nodded. "Why did you really leave the capital 20 years ago? The story I heard was that you challenged the old king and lost. But there's more to it than that." The older wolf was quiet for so long Selena thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down his food and leaned back against the cave wall. "I didn't just challenge Darius's father for the throne. I challenged the entire system. The way alphas treat omegas like property, the way lower-ranking wolves are ground down to keep the powerful comfortable, the corruption that runs so deep most wolves can't even see it anymore." His jaw tightened. "I thought if I could take the crown, I could change things. Make the North into something worth defending instead of a collection of tyrants fighting over who gets to be the biggest monster. But you lost. I lost. And the old king gave me a choice: exile or execution. I chose exile because I wasn't ready to die for a kingdom that didn't want to be saved." Kai's golden eyes reflected firelight. "I've spent 2 decades in the borderlands watching the same patterns repeat, watching Darius become exactly what his father was. Watching good wolves get crushed under systems designed to keep them weak. And now I have a chance to disrupt the pattern. That baby you're carrying is the kind of catalyst that only comes along once in a generation, maybe once in several lifetimes. If it survives, if it's raised right, it could unite the packs under a new kind of leadership, one that doesn't rely on fear and brutality." Selena's hand moved to her stomach. "That's a lot of pressure to put on an unborn child." "Welcome to being born into power." Kai's tone was dry. "The baby doesn't get to choose whether it's important. Only what it does with that importance once it's old enough to understand what it means." The fire cracked. Selena pulled her cloak tighter against the cold seeping in from the cave mouth. Outside, snow had started falling again, heavy flakes that would cover their tracks by morning. "You said you'd train me, teach me to fight. I did. When do we start?" Kai smiled, all teeth. "Tomorrow. And it's going to hurt worse than anything you've experienced so far. Because I'm not teaching you to be adequate. I'm teaching you to survive wolves who'll want you dead the moment they realize what you represent." Selena met his gaze and didn't look away. "Good. Because I'm tired of being the wolf everyone underestimates." They reached Kai's stronghold on the 5th day. It was built into the side of a mountain, stone structures that looked like they'd been there for centuries. Maybe longer. The architecture was different from anything Selena had seen, older and more deliberate, with defensive positions carved directly into rock. A dozen wolves emerged as they approached. All of them moved with the controlled grace of trained fighters. All of them watched Selena with the same measuring intensity. Kai dismounted. "This is Selena Vale. She'll be staying with us until the baby is born. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave now." Nobody moved. "Good." Kai gestured to a woman with scars running down her left arm. "Vera, get her settled in the East Wing. Make sure she has everything she needs." The scarred woman nodded and moved to help Selena dismount. Up close, Selena could see she was older than she'd first appeared, maybe late 40s, with gray threading through her dark hair. "Come on, I'll show you around." The stronghold was more extensive than it looked from outside. Carved rooms that went deep into the mountain, living quarters and training spaces, and what looked like a massive library filled with books and scrolls. Vera led her to a room that was simple but clean. A bed, a desk, a window that looked out over the valley below. Better than the palace in some ways. No gold, no silk, just function and honesty. "You'll start training tomorrow morning." Vera's tone was neutral. Kai doesn't believe in easing people into it, so be prepared for that. "I will." The scarred woman paused at the door. "For what it's worth, most of us here are wolves who got thrown away by the system. Omegas who refused to submit. Lower ranks who fought back. Kai gave us a place when no one else would. So we don't judge based on what pack you came from or what rank you were born into. We judge based on what you do when things get hard." Selena nodded. "That's fair." Vera left. Selena stood alone in the room and felt the weight of everything that had happened crash down on her. The exile, the journey, the revelation about the baby's bloodline, the choice to come here with a wolf she barely knew to learn how to become something she'd never imagined being. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something close to relief. For the first time since the night Darius signed those divorce papers, she wasn't running, wasn't hiding, wasn't waiting for someone else to decide her fate. She was choosing, actively, deliberately, and that felt like power. Training started at dawn. Kai met her in a courtyard carved from rock, wearing simple fighting clothes. No armor, no weapons except a practice sword made of wood. Selena had dressed in similar gear, borrowed from Vera. Her stomach was showing clearly now, impossible to hide. 5 months along and the baby was making its presence known with constant movement. Kai looked at her belly. "You tell me if anything feels wrong. If the training is too much, I'm pushing you hard, but I'm not trying to kill the baby in the process." "Understood." "Good. Now show me what you know." Selena picked up the practice sword he'd left for her. It was heavier than she expected, the weight unfamiliar in her hands. "I don't know anything. I've never trained to fight. Everyone knows something, even if it's just how to survive." "Show me that." She swung the sword, awkward, too much force in the wrong direction. Kai stepped aside easily, and the momentum nearly pulled her off balance. Again. She tried. Failed. Tried again. Each attempt was worse than the last, her body fighting against movements it didn't understand. After the 10th failure, Selena threw the sword down. "This is pointless. I'm a healer, not a warrior." Kai picked up the sword and handed it back to her. "You're whatever you choose to be, and right now you need to choose to be someone who can defend herself. Because the wolves who come for that baby won't care that you prefer healing to killing." "I can't do this." "You can. You're just afraid of being bad at something." Kai's tone was relentless. "You've spent your whole life being good at healing, at being gentle, at fitting into the role other wolves expected from you. And it earned you exactly nothing. So stop trying to be good at this and just do it. Fail as many times as it takes to learn." Something in his words cracked through her frustration. Selena picked up the sword again. This time when she swung, she didn't think about doing it right, just about doing it with intent. Kai blocked, but she felt the difference, felt her body starting to understand the weight, the balance, the way force transferred through muscle and bone. Better. Again. They trained for 3 hours. By the end, Selena's arms were shaking, her clothes soaked with sweat despite the cold. But she'd managed to land one hit. Just one. A glancing blow across Kai's ribs that wouldn't have hurt him but proved she could make contact. He smiled. "Tomorrow we work on endurance. And the day after, strategy. You have 4 months before that baby comes. We're going to use every day." Selena nodded, too exhausted to speak. That became her routine. Train at dawn until her body gave out. Rest. Eat. Study strategy and pack politics with the other wolves in the stronghold. Train again in the evening. Sleep. Repeat. The days blurred together. Selena's body changed, not just from the pregnancy, but from the constant physical demand. Muscle built under her skin, her reflexes sharpened. She learned how to read an opponent's movement before they committed to it, how to use her smaller size as an advantage, how to fight dirty when clean fighting wouldn't work. And the baby grew inside her, strong and active, its presence a constant reminder of why she was doing this. 6 weeks into her training, a messenger arrived at the stronghold. Selena was in the courtyard practicing knife work with Vera when the wolf rode in, his horse lathered and exhausted. Kai met him at the gate and they spoke in low voices Selena couldn't hear from where she stood. But she saw Kai's expression change, saw his jaw tighten in the way that meant bad news. When the messenger left, Kai called everyone to the main hall. 20 wolves gathered, all of them looking to their leader for explanation. Selena stood at the back, her heart already starting to race because she knew. Somehow she knew this was about her. Kai's golden eyes swept the room. I just received word from a source inside the Northern Palace. Darius Thorne has figured out that his ex-wife is pregnant, and he knows the child she's carrying is his. The room erupted, voices overlapping, questions being thrown at Kai from all directions. Selena felt the floor tilt under her feet. How? She'd been so careful, had used every herb and technique she knew to mask her scent, to hide the pregnancy from anyone who might report back to the capital. Kai held up his hand for silence. One of the palace healers kept detailed records of Selena's medical treatments, including her pregnancy symptoms from the early months. Cassian Riker found the records 2 weeks ago and brought them to the king. Cassian. Of course it was Cassian, the beta who'd orchestrated her exile in the first place, who'd forged evidence and destroyed her life to serve whatever agenda he was playing. Selena's hands curled into fists. What does Darius want? Kai's expression was grim. He's issued a royal decree. Any wolf who returns Selena Vale to the palace alive and unharmed will be granted land, title, and a seat on his war council. The bounty is substantial enough that half the north is probably already mobilizing to collect. The stronghold wolves started talking at once, arguing about defenses, about whether to move Selena somewhere even more remote, about what this meant for all of them. Selena barely heard any of it. Her mind was stuck on one detail: alive and unharmed. Darius didn't want her dead, wanted her brought back, because now she was carrying something he valued, something he'd thrown away without realizing its worth. And he thought he could just take it back. The rage that flooded through her was so intense it felt like her blood had turned to fire. She'd spent 6 months being terrified, being hunted, being forced to rebuild herself from nothing. And now he wanted to erase all of that. Wanted to drag her back to the palace like she was property he'd misplaced. Selena stepped forward. Her voice cut through the noise. Let him come! The hall went silent. Every wolf turned to stare at her. Kai's eyebrows rose. You want to face him? I want him to know what he lost. Want him to see what I've become without him. Selena's wolf was fully present now, lending her a confidence that felt bigger than her body. And then I want to watch his face when I tell him he'll never touch this child, never use it as a political tool, never get the chance to corrupt something pure the way his father corrupted him. That's suicide. Vera's voice was flat. You can't fight the Alpha King, not alone. I'm not planning to fight him. Selena looked at Kai. I'm planning to make him realize that taking me by force will cost him more than letting me go, that trying to claim this baby will fracture what's left of his kingdom's stability. And how exactly do you plan to do that? Selena took a breath. By giving him a choice. Me and the baby in exchange for one thing. Kai's golden eyes narrowed. What thing? The truth about who framed me, who forged those letters and orchestrated my exile. She met his gaze. Because if Darius is smart enough to figure out I was pregnant, he's smart enough to question whether the evidence against me was real. And I'm betting he already has doubts. Already suspects Cassian played him. You're gambling with your life based on a guess about what Darius might suspect. Yes, because the alternative is running forever. Raising this baby in hiding, always looking over my shoulder, never knowing when the next bounty hunter will find us. Selena's hand moved to her stomach. I won't do that. Won't give my child a life built on fear. The hall was silent, wolves watching her like she'd lost her mind. Maybe she had. Or maybe this was what sanity looked like when you'd been pushed past every limit and finally stopped caring about the consequences. Kai studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, sharp and dangerous. All right, we'll send word to the capital. Set up a meeting on neutral ground. But you need to understand something. The moment Darius sees you, sees the baby, there's a chance he decides to take you both by force regardless of what deal you're offering. Then I'll make sure he knows that Trine will start a war with every borderland pack. That ancient wolf bloodlines don't submit to tyrants. That the child I'm carrying will grow up knowing exactly what kind of wolf its father is. Selena's voice was steady. And I'll make sure he understands that if he truly wants any relationship with this baby, he needs to prove he's capable of being something more than the monster his father raised. You really think he'll listen? No. But I think his pride will make him try. And that's enough to work with. Kai nodded slowly. Then we prepare. You have 2 weeks before you're too pregnant to travel safely. We use that time to make sure you're ready for whatever happens when you face him. Selena felt something settle in her chest. Not peace, but certainty. The kind that came from making a choice you knew might destroy you, but making it anyway because the alternative was worse. She'd been running for 6 months, hiding, becoming stronger, learning how to survive. Now it was time to stop running, time to make Darius Thorne face what he'd done the night he chose pride over truth, and time to prove that the Omega he'd thrown away had become something he never expected, something that wouldn't break, something that would burn his entire world down if he tried to take what wasn't his. The message was sent 3 days later. A simple letter carried by a neutral pack delivered directly to the Alpha King's hands. It said only this: I have what you're looking for. Meet me at the Blood Summit grounds on the first night of the new moon. Come alone or don't come at all. We end this on my terms or not at all. No signature, no explanation. Darius would know who sent it, and Selena would be waiting when he arrived, ready to see if the wolf who'd destroyed her was capable of becoming something worth the child they'd created together, or if she'd have to destroy him first to keep her baby safe. The Blood Summit grounds sat in a valley between 3 mountains, neutral territory that had hosted pact negotiations for 200 years. No wolf claimed it. No pack could build structures on it. It existed purely as a space where enemies could meet without the territorial advantage tipping scales before words were even spoken. Selena arrived 2 hours before moonrise with Kai and 5 of his best fighters. The snow had stopped falling, but the ground was still covered, unmarked white stretching in all directions. The air was so cold it burned her lungs with each breath. She was 7 months pregnant now. The baby had dropped lower in recent weeks, preparing for birth that would come in maybe 8 more. Her body had changed in ways that went beyond the obvious swell of her belly. She moved differently, her center of gravity shifted, her wolf constantly alert to protect the life inside her. But she was stronger than she'd ever been. Months of training with Kai had built muscle and endurance she hadn't known she was capable of. Her hands were calloused from weapons practice. Her reflexes were sharp enough that she'd managed to land hits on wolves twice her size. She wasn't the soft Palace Omega anymore. And tonight Darius would see exactly what he'd created when he threw her away. Kai stood beside her, golden eyes scanning the valley. He'll bring soldiers, regardless of what your letter said about coming alone. I know. And you're still planning to go through with this? Yes. Selena's hand moved to her stomach, feeling the baby kick strong and insistent against her palm. Because running solved nothing. Hiding solved nothing. The only way forward is through. The older wolf was quiet for a moment. You've changed. When I first found you in that village, you were still holding on to the idea that you could go back to being who you were before. That maybe if you proved your innocence, Darius would take you back and everything would return to normal. Selena looked at him. And now? Now you understand that normal is just another word for broken. That the girl who loved Darius Thorne died the night he signed those divorce papers. Kai's expression was almost proud. You're not trying to resurrect her anymore. You're building something new from what's left. The words settled in her chest like truth finally spoken aloud. She'd spent months grieving the future she'd imagined. The version of herself that believed love could soften a wolf built from violence and duty. But grief had limits. Eventually you either drowned in it or you used it as fuel to become something that couldn't be drowned. Selena had chosen fuel. Movement on the southern ridge caught her attention. Wolves emerging from the tree line, at least 20 of them in formation. Royal guards wearing the black and silver of the northern kingdom. And at their center, unmistakable even at this distance, Darius Thorne. He rode a massive gray warhorse, his armor catching what little light the pre-moonrise sky offered. Even from here, Selena could feel the weight of his presence, that alpha dominance that made weaker wolves bare their throats without conscious thought. 6 months ago, that presence would have made her wolf whimper and submit. Now it just made her angry. Kai's fighters tensed, hands moving toward weapons. The math was bad. 20 royal soldiers against 6 borderland wolves. If this turned into a fight, they'd be slaughtered. But Selena hadn't come here to fight. She'd come here to break something in Darius that armor and swords couldn't protect. Hold position. She kept her voice low but firm. No one moves unless he attacks first. The royal soldiers spread out as they descended into the valley, creating a perimeter that effectively trapped Selena's group in the center. Strategic, efficient, exactly the kind of tactical deployment she'd watched Darius plan 100 times in the war room. He dismounted 50 feet away, removed his helmet, and handed it to the soldier beside him. His dark hair was longer than she remembered, pulled back in a way that emphasized the brutal angles of his face. The scar through his eyebrow was the same. The gray eyes were the same. But something in his expression was different, harder somehow, like whatever capacity for softness he'd possessed had been burned out completely. He walked forward alone, stopped 20 feet from where Selena stood. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, just looked at each other across the snow-covered ground, 2 wolves who'd shared a bed and built nothing lasting from it. Darius's eyes dropped to her belly, traveled over the obvious swell of pregnancy that her cloak couldn't hide. Something flickered in his expression, not quite emotion, more like a predator recognizing valuable prey. "You're carrying my child." His voice was exactly as she remembered, deep, controlled, the kind of tone that expected obedience without needing to demand it. Selena lifted her chin. "I'm carrying my child. The genetics might be half yours, but you gave up any claim to it the night you signed divorce papers without bothering to verify whether the evidence against me was real. The evidence was verified. 3 separate analysts confirmed your handwriting. 3 analysts who worked for Cassian Riker, who reported directly to the beta you trusted more than your own wife." Selena's tone was sharp. "Did you ever question that? Did it ever occur to you that maybe your second-in-command had reasons to want me gone?" Darius's jaw tightened. "Cassian has served my family for 15 years. He has no reason to betray me. Except ambition, except wanting the throne for himself, except seeing me as an obstacle to whatever plans he's been making since before you inherited the crown." Selena took a step forward and felt Kai tense beside her, but she kept moving. "You trusted him over me, chose his word over mine. And now you figured out I was pregnant and suddenly you want me back. Not because you believe I'm innocent, not because you regret what you did, but because that baby represents power. You can't afford to lose." She was close enough now to see the muscles in his throat work as he swallowed, close enough to smell smoke and leather and that wild scent that used to make her feel safe. It just made her feel sick now. "I made a mistake." Darius's words came out rough, like admitting fault was physically painful. The evidence seemed conclusive at the time, and Cassian presented it in a way that left no room for doubt. "So you're saying you were manipulated?" "I'm saying I acted on the information I had." His eyes met hers, and there was something almost like regret buried in them. "If I'd known you were pregnant, I would have handled things differently. You would have kept me prisoner instead of exiling me, kept the baby as leverage, used our child to strengthen your claim to the throne." Selena's laugh was bitter. "That's not better, Darius. That's just a different kind of cruelty." His hand moved like he was going to reach for her, then dropped. "I want you to come back to the palace, both of you. I'll reinstate your title, give you protection, make sure the child is raised with every advantage, as your possession, as my family." The word hung between them. Family. Like it meant something. Like 2 years of cold distance and political maneuvering could be erased because now there was a baby involved. Selena felt the rage building in her chest, hot and sharp. "You don't get to do this. Don't get to throw me away and then decide you want me back once I'm carrying something valuable. I'm not a breeding wolf you can discard and reclaim at your convenience. That's not what I'm doing." "Then what are you doing?" Selena's voice rose. "Because from where I'm standing, you've spent 6 months hunting me, putting bounties on my head, sending soldiers to intimidate any pack that might give me shelter. And now you show up here acting like offering me a place in your palace is some kind of mercy." Darius's expression hardened. I'm offering you safety, resources, a future where our child doesn't grow up in the borderlands living off scraps and charity. That's more than most exiled Omegas get. Most exiled Omegas weren't innocent. Most exiled Omegas actually committed the crimes they were accused of. Selena stepped even closer and her wolf surged to the surface, lending her a presence that made several of the royal soldiers shift nervously. I was framed, set up by someone you trusted, and instead of investigating, instead of giving me even the smallest benefit of doubt, you believed the worst and threw me out like garbage. She was right in front of him now, close enough to see the barely controlled fury in his eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating off his body despite the freezing air. If you actually cared about me, about this baby, you would have questioned the evidence, would have demanded proof beyond forged letters, would have protected your wife instead of your pride. Darius's hand shot out and gripped her wrist, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to hold her in place. His voice dropped to something almost dangerous. I am protecting you, right now, by offering you a choice before I stop offering and simply take what's mine. Selena felt ice flood her veins. There it was. The truth underneath all the careful words about family and safety. He didn't want her back because he loved her or believed in her innocence. He wanted the baby. Wanted the ancient wolf bloodline that would legitimize his rule in ways pure strength never could. And he was willing to take it by force if she refused to comply. She looked down at his hand on her wrist, then back up at his face. Let go of me. Come back to the palace. Stop this foolishness and accept the protection I'm offering. Selena's wolf rose up fully, flooding her system with strength that had nothing to do with being Omega and everything to do with being a mother protecting her young. She twisted her wrist in the exact way Kai had taught her, breaking Darius's grip with a move he clearly hadn't expected from her. She stepped back and her hand went to the knife at her belt. You want this baby? You're going to have to go through me to get it, and I promise you, Darius, I'm not the soft palace decoration you remember. I've spent 6 months learning how to survive, learning how to fight, learning that the only wolf I can trust to protect my child is me. The royal soldiers moved forward, hands on weapons. Kai's fighters did the same. The valley suddenly felt smaller, the air thick with the promise of violence. Darius held up his hand and his soldiers stopped, but his eyes never left Selena's face. You've changed. You made me change. Made me realize that love is just another word for weakness in your world, that trusting you was the biggest mistake I ever made. Selena's grip tightened on her knife. So yes, I've changed. I've become exactly what I needed to be to survive the damage you caused. Something shifted in Darius's expression. Not quite pain, but close to it, as if some part of him was finally understanding what he'd destroyed. Then a new voice cut through the tension. How touching. The reunited couple, ready to tear each other apart over a baby neither of them deserves. Everyone turned. A figure emerged from the northern tree line, walking alone across the snow with the kind of confidence that came from holding all the cards. Cassian Riker. He looked exactly as Selena remembered. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of handsome face that hid calculation behind a pleasant smile. Except he wasn't smiling now. His expression was pure satisfaction, like watching a plan come together exactly as designed. Darius's entire body went rigid. What are you doing here? Following you. Making sure you didn't do something stupid like take back the wife I worked so hard to get rid of. Cassian's tone was conversational. Though I have to admit I didn't expect her to be this pregnant. You really should have told me you were still betting her after the divorce was finalized. Would have saved us all some trouble. The pieces clicked into place. Selena saw it reflected in Darius's face, the moment understanding hit like a fist. You forged the evidence, obviously. Cassian pulled out a knife, casual as anything. Someone had to protect you from your own weakness. You were getting too comfortable with her, too soft. The council was starting to question whether you had the strength to lead. Removing the Omega solved multiple problems at once. Darius took a step toward his beta, and the threat in his body language was unmistakable. You framed my wife for treason, destroyed my marriage, made me exile the mother of my child. Your heir, you mean? Cassian's smile widened. That baby she's carrying is worth more than both of you combined. Ancient wolf bloodline, strong enough to unite every pack in the north. Whoever controls that child controls the future of this kingdom. He started walking toward Selena, and every wolf in the valley tensed. And I've spent 6 months positioning myself to be the one who controls it. Had you convinced she was a traitor? Had the bounty hunters track her movements? Made sure when she finally surfaced, it would be on ground I controlled? Kai moved in front of Selena, his golden eyes blazing. You're not touching her. I don't need to touch her. Just need to wait until she gives birth, then eliminate anyone who might contest my claim to the throne. Cassian's gaze shifted to Darius. Starting with you. The royal soldiers who'd come with Darius suddenly drew weapons, but they weren't pointing them at Kai's fighters. They were pointing them at their own king. Selena's stomach dropped. Half of Darius's personal guard had been bought by Cassian, turned against their alpha in a coup that had been planned for months, maybe years. Darius looked at the soldiers surrounding him, at wolves he'd trusted with his life now prepared to kill him on his beta's command. And for the first time since Selena had known him, she saw something like fear in his eyes. Not fear of death, fear of having been so thoroughly outmaneuvered. Stand down! His voice carried alpha command, the kind of dominance that should have forced immediate obedience. 3 of the soldiers lowered their weapons. The rest stayed firm. Cassian laughed. Your power is already broken, Darius. Half your military answers to me now. The council thinks you're incompetent for letting your pregnant wife escape. The lower packs are questioning whether you're strong enough to lead. He gestured at the soldiers. 1 word from me and you die here in the snow. Unmourned. Unmissed. Just another failed alpha who couldn't hold his throne. Selena's mind was racing. She looked at Kai, saw him calculating odds that weren't in their favor. Looked at Darius, isolated and surrounded by wolves he'd thought were loyal. Looked at Cassian, who'd orchestrated this entire nightmare and was now seconds away from winning. The baby kicked hard inside her belly, sharp, insistent, like it was telling her to do something. She stepped around Kai before he could stop her. You want the baby? You want to use my child as a political tool to steal a throne? Selena's voice rang across the valley. Then you better be prepared to go through every wolf here. Because I don't care if you bought half the royal guard. I don't care if you planned this for years. I will die before I let you touch my child. Cassian's expression shifted to something ugly. You're an Omega. You have no power here. I have the one thing you can't buy or manipulate or control. Selena spread her hands over her belly, protective and defiant. I have this baby's loyalty, its trust, its love. And when it grows up, when it comes into the full power of that ancient wolf bloodline, it will remember that its mother chose death over letting you win. She looked at the soldiers, at the wolves who'd been turned against their king. You think serving Cassian will give you power? Will make you safe? He's showing you exactly what he'll do to anyone who gets in his way. He destroyed me to remove an obstacle. He's destroying Darius to take the throne. What makes you think you'll be any different when you stop being useful? A few of the soldiers shifted, uncertainty creeping into their expressions. Cassian's face darkened. Kill her. The command hung in the frozen air. And then Darius moved. He was fast, faster than Selena had ever seen him, his alpha strength fully unleashed. He hit the nearest soldier with enough force to snap bone, grab the wolf's sword before the body hit the ground, and spun to face Cassian with murder in his eyes. You want my throne? Come take it yourself instead of hiding behind wolves you manipulated. The valley erupted into chaos. Cassian's soldiers attacked. Kai's fighters met them head-on. Royal guards who'd stayed loyal to Darius joined the fight, creating a 3-way battle that turned the snow red within seconds. Selena backed toward the edge of the fighting, her hands on her belly, her wolf screaming at her to run. But there was nowhere to run. Wolves surrounded her on all sides, fighting and dying in the space between betrayal and loyalty. She saw Kai take down 2 soldiers with moves so fast they blurred, saw Vera fighting back-to-back with one of the loyal royal guards, saw Darius cut through Cassian's forces like they were nothing, his sword work brutal and efficient and absolutely terrifying. And she saw Cassian watching it all with cold calculation, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came when Darius overextended on a killing blow, left his right side exposed for just a heartbeat. Cassian moved like lightning. His blade drove toward Darius's ribs, angled up to pierce heart and lung. Selena screamed a warning, but it was drowned in the sounds of battle. Darius twisted at the last second. Cassian's blade missed the heart, but carved a deep wound across his torso. Blood poured hot and dark, steam rising where it hit the frozen ground. The Alpha King went down on one knee. Cassian raised his sword for the killing blow. And Selena did something she'd never imagined herself capable of. She ran forward, her pregnant body moving faster than it should have been able to, and threw herself between Cassian and Darius with her own knife raised. The beta's blade stopped inches from her throat. "Move!" His voice was ice. "No." Selena's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "You want to kill him, you go through me first, through us both." She felt Darius behind her, felt his blood soaking into the snow, felt his labored breathing as he struggled to stand. Cassian's eyes narrowed. "You're willing to die for him? After everything he did to you?" "I'm willing to die to stop you. There's a difference." Selena's grip tightened on her knife. "You're everything wrong with this kingdom. Everything that needs to burn before something better can grow. And I won't let you use my child to build your empire of manipulation and betrayal." For a long moment, Cassian just stared at her. Then he smiled. Brave, stupid, but brave. His blade moved, and Selena discovered that 6 months of training with Kai had taught her more than she realized. Her body reacted on pure instinct, knife coming up to deflect Cassian's strike, even as she twisted away from the follow-through that would have gutted her. The blades met with a sound like breaking bells. Behind her, she heard Darius surge to his feet, heard his roar of fury that carried Alpha Command powerful enough to freeze half the battlefield. The fighting paused. Wolves on all sides turned to look at their king, bleeding and enraged, and absolutely lethal despite his wounds. Darius's voice carried across the valley, raw with pain and fury, and something that might have been regret. "Any wolf who stands with Cassian Riker dies here. Any wolf who returns to my service now will be pardoned. Choose." The soldiers who'd been bought hesitated, looked at Cassian, looked at Darius, looked at Selena standing between them with a knife in her hand and 7 months of pregnancy making her vulnerable in ways that should have meant death. One by one, they lowered their weapons. Cassian watched his coup collapse in real time, watched his carefully laid plans unravel because he'd underestimated the one wolf he thought didn't matter. His expression twisted into something feral. "Then if I can't have the throne, I'll make sure no one does." He lunged for Selena with speed that blurred, his blade aimed directly at her belly. At the baby. Time seemed to slow. Selena saw the strike coming, knew she couldn't dodge fast enough, knew that in another heartbeat Cassian's sword would pierce through her and kill the child she'd spent 6 months protecting. And then Darius was there. He threw himself in front of her, his body a shield, and Cassian's blade punched through his back and emerged from his chest in a spray of blood that painted the snow crimson. The world stopped. Darius looked down at the sword protruding from his torso, looked up at Cassian's shocked face, and smiled. Mistake. His hand shot out and gripped Cassian's throat, squeezed. The beta tried to pull away, but Darius's alpha strength held him in place even as blood poured from the wound that should have killed him instantly. "You wanted my throne, wanted my kingdom, wanted my child." Darius's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried in the absolute silence that had fallen over the valley. "But you forgot the most important rule." Cassian's face was turning purple. "An alpha protects his family, even from himself." Darius's grip tightened until something in Cassian's neck snapped with a sound like dry wood breaking. The beta's body went limp. Darius let it fall to the blood-stained snow and turned to look at Selena. Their eyes met. And in that moment, she saw everything he'd never been able to say. The regret. The love he'd been too broken to show. The understanding that he'd destroyed the best thing in his life and there was no coming back from it. He opened his mouth to speak and collapsed. Selena dropped to her knees beside Darius's collapsed body, and the snow soaked through her clothes within seconds, ice cold against her skin, but she barely felt it. Blood was everywhere, pooling dark and steaming in the frozen air, more blood than any wolf should lose and still be breathing. But he was breathing, shallow, ragged, each exhale carrying a sound like tearing fabric. Her hands moved on instinct, pressing against the wound in his chest where Cassian's blade had punched through. The injury was catastrophic. She could feel it even without her healing sense, could feel how the steel had carved through muscle and nicked the edge of his lung. Maybe worse, maybe so much worse that even her abilities wouldn't be enough. But she had to try. Selena closed her eyes and let her wolf rise fully to the surface. That warmth spread from her core through her palms, the healing power that had saved Marcus and dozens of other wolves over the past months. Except this was different. This wasn't infection or broken bones or wounds that just needed time and guidance to knit properly. This was damage that wanted Darius dead. She felt the baby kick inside her belly, strong and insistent, and suddenly there was more power flowing through her hands than she'd ever accessed before. The child was contributing somehow, lending its ancient wolf bloodline to amplify what she could do. Heat poured from her palms hot enough that she saw steam rising where her skin met Darius's blood-soaked chest. The tissue began to respond, slowly, too slowly. But it was responding. Kai appeared at her side, his golden eyes taking in the situation with the kind of rapid assessment that came from decades of battlefield experience. How bad? Bad enough that he should already be dead. Selena didn't open her eyes, didn't break concentration. I can stabilize him, but I need time. And I need everyone to stop trying to kill each other for 5 minutes. The older wolf stood and his voice carried across the valley with alpha command that rivaled anything Darius had ever produced. The battle is over. Any wolf still holding a weapon drops it now or answers to me. The remaining fighters obeyed. Swords and knives hit the snow with dull thuds. The royal guards who'd stayed loyal to Darius formed a defensive perimeter. The ones who'd been bought by Cassian stood uncertain, their leader dead and their coup shattered. Vera moved through the wounded, her scarred hands checking pulses and assessing who could be saved. The death count was ugly. At least 15 wolves dead in the snow, maybe more. Most of them Cassian's bought soldiers, a few of Kai's fighters, 2 of the loyal royal guards. All because one ambitious beta had decided manipulating his king was easier than earning power honestly. Selena kept her focus on Darius. The wound was closing incrementally, flesh knitting together in a way that defied normal healing speeds but still felt agonizingly slow. She could sense his wolf fighting to survive, could feel the alpha strength in his bloodline refusing to surrender even when his body was ready to quit. And underneath all of that, buried so deep she almost missed it, she felt something else. Regret. Not the surface kind that came from tactical mistakes or poor timing. Deep regret. The kind that lived in bone marrow and changed the fundamental shape of who someone was. Darius's wolf was drowning in it, grief and self-recrimination so intense it was actually interfering with his body's ability to heal. He blamed himself for trusting Cassian, for exiling her, for every choice that had led to this moment where he was bleeding out in the snow while his pregnant ex-wife tried desperately to save him. Selena's throat tightened. She pushed more heat into the wound, more healing intent, and whispered words she wasn't even sure he could hear. "Don't you dare die on me. Not after finally doing something right. Not after choosing to protect instead of possess." His eyes opened, just barely. Gray and clouded with pain, but focused on her face. "Selena." His voice was a rasp that barely qualified as sound. "The baby is fine. Stop talking. Save your strength. Did I kill him?" Cassian. "Yes. You killed him. And half your guard watched you do it." Selena's hands were shaking now, exhaustion creeping in as the healing drained her reserves. "So you better survive this. Better live long enough to deal with the political mess you've created." Something that might have been a smile touched his mouth. "Bossy. Someone has to be. You're clearly terrible at making decisions on your own." The wound was mostly closed now, but the internal damage was still critical. She could feel his lung trying to reinflate, could sense his heart struggling to maintain rhythm with the blood loss. He needed proper medical care. Needed a full surgery team and resources she didn't have access to in the middle of a frozen valley. But she'd stabilized him, bought him time. Selena pulled her hands back and immediately felt the loss of that connection. The baby stopped kicking, its contribution to the healing finished. She pressed one hand to her belly, reassuring herself that the child was okay, that lending its power hadn't damaged it somehow. Kai knelt beside her. "He'll live? If we get him somewhere warm in the next hour, if infection doesn't set in, if his body doesn't go into shock from the trauma." Selena looked at the older wolf. "So maybe he lives." "Good enough." Kai gestured to 2 of his fighters. "Get the Alpha King on a horse. We're taking him back to the stronghold." One of the royal guards stepped forward. His face was young, maybe 25, with the kind of earnest expression that said he actually believed in honor and duty. His armor was dented and bloody, but he stood straight. With respect, the king should return to the palace, to proper healers and his own physicians. "Your proper healer didn't save him." "She did?" Kai's tone was flat. And your palace is full of wolves who just tried to kill him. So unless you want to watch him bleed out from a second assassination attempt, I suggest you let us handle his recovery. The guard looked at Selena, at the Omega who'd thrown herself between an alpha and certain death, who'd healed the wolf, who'd exiled her instead of letting him die. His expression shifted to something like respect. I'll ride with you. Make sure he reaches your stronghold safely. Kai nodded. Anyone else who wants to ensure their king's survival can follow. But you follow my rules, my territory, my command until he's recovered enough to reclaim his throne. 3 more guards stepped forward. The rest looked uncertain, caught between loyalty and self-preservation. Eventually, 2 more joined the group willing to ride with Kai. 6 royal guards out of 20. The rest would return to the capital and report what had happened. Would tell the council that Cassian Riker had staged a coup and died for it, that the Alpha King was gravely wounded, that the exiled Omega Queen had saved his life. The political implications were staggering, but Selena was too exhausted to care about politics right now. They got Darius on a horse, securing him so he wouldn't fall even unconscious. Selena mounted behind him, her pregnant belly making it awkward, but she refused to let anyone else steady him during the ride. Her arms wrapped around his torso, careful of the healing wound, and she felt his heartbeat against her palms. Still alive. Still fighting. The group rode north as the moon finally rose overhead, full and cold and indifferent to the violence that had played out beneath it. The journey back to Kai's stronghold took 4 hours instead of the usual 3 because they had to move slowly with Darius's injuries. Twice they stopped, so Selena could check his wound, make sure it wasn't reopening. Both times she poured more healing into him, and both times it left her dizzy and nauseous. The baby didn't contribute again. Whatever reserve of power it had lent was depleted. They reached the stronghold just before dawn. Vera had ridden ahead and prepared a room, clean bandages and hot water and every medicinal herb the borderland wolves had stockpiled. They carried Darius inside and laid him on a bed that was too small for his frame, his feet hanging off the edge. Selena spent the next 6 hours working on him, cleaning the wound properly, stitching what her healing hadn't fully closed, monitoring his breathing and heart rate. The royal guards who'd followed stood watch outside the door, their presence a strange comfort. Kai brought her food she didn't eat. Water she forced down because the baby needed her hydrated. Updates on the other wounded that she absorbed without really processing. By midday, Darius's fever broke. His breathing evened out. The gray pallor faded from his skin. He was going to live. Selena finally let herself collapse into a chair beside the bed, every muscle screaming. Her back ached from the pregnancy and the hours bent over his body. Her hands were stained with his blood. She smelled like sweat and herbs and death. And she'd never been so tired in her entire life. She must have fallen asleep because when she opened her eyes again, it was dark outside and someone had covered her with a blanket. The room was lit by a single candle. And Darius was awake, watching her with those gray eyes that had haunted her dreams for 6 months. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he broke the silence with a voice still rough from trauma. You saved me. Selena sat up straighter, ignoring the way her spine protested. Didn't have much choice. You threw yourself in front of a sword meant for our baby. Least I could do was make sure you didn't die from the heroics. His hand moved to his chest, fingers finding the bandages wrapped around his torso. How bad? Bad enough that you'll be recovering for weeks, maybe months. Selena's tone was clinical, falling back on healer detachment because the alternative was feeling too much. The blade missed your heart by maybe an inch, nicked your lung. You lost enough blood that most wolves would have died before I even started working. But I didn't die. No. You didn't. She looked at him properly, taking in the exhaustion written in every line of his face, because apparently you're too stubborn to know when to quit. I learned from the best. Something flickered in his expression. You could have let me bleed out, could have taken the baby and disappeared while everyone was distracted. No one would have blamed you. Selena's laugh was bitter. Is that what you think of me? That I'm capable of watching someone die when I have the power to save them? Even someone who destroyed my life? I wouldn't blame you if you were. Well, I'm not. She stood, needing movement to burn off the emotions rising in her chest. I'm not built like you, Darius. I don't get to turn off my compassion when it's inconvenient. Don't get to choose who deserves saving based on whether they've earned it. He was quiet for a moment. Then his voice came out softer than she'd ever heard it. I'm sorry. 2 words. Simple. Completely inadequate for the damage he'd caused. Selena turned to face him. For what specifically? For trusting Cassian over me? For signing divorce papers without bothering to investigate? For putting bounties on my head? For making me spend 6 months hiding in the borderlands while pregnant because you decided I was disposable? All of it. Darius tried to sit up, grimaced, and settled back against the pillows. I failed you in every way that mattered. Let my pride and my paranoia override my judgment. Believed the worst because it was easier than questioning the systems I'd built my entire rule on. He looked at her, and there was something raw in his eyes. Something she'd never seen before. Cassian showed me exactly what I wanted to see. Evidence that confirmed my fears about being weak. About letting an Omega too close to power. About trusting anyone in a world where trust gets you killed. And I took it. Didn't question it. Didn't fight for you the way you deserved. His hand moved to his chest again, pressing against the wound that was still healing. I watched you stand between me and Cassian's blade. Watched you defend the wolf who'd thrown you away. And I realized that you have more strength in your smallest finger than I've ever had in my entire body. Because real strength isn't about dominance or control. It's about choosing compassion even when you've earned the right to choose violence. Selena felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You're right. You did fail me. Failed us. And sorry doesn't fix that. I know. So what now? She gestured at the room, at the stronghold beyond. You're wounded. Cassian's dead. Half your guard watched you kill your own beta. The kingdom is going to be chaos when word spreads. Then I deal with the chaos. Darius's jaw tightened. I go back to the capital. I face the council. I tear apart every system Cassian corrupted and rebuild from the ground up. And me? The baby? Selena's hand moved to her belly. What happens to us in your grand reconstruction? That's your choice. His eyes met hers. I'm not going to force you to come back. Not going to demand access to the child or threaten you if you refuse. You've earned the right to live however you want, wherever you want. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of truth spoken at great cost. But I'm asking, not as a king, not as an alpha claiming what's his, just as the wolf who's loved you since the day you walked into my palace and looked at me like I was someone worth saving instead of someone to fear. Selena's breath caught. You never said that. Never once told me you loved me. Because I didn't know how. Didn't know what love looked like when you've been raised to see it as weakness. Darius's expression was anguished. My father taught me that alphas don't love. They possess. They control. They take what they want and destroy anything that threatens their power. And I spent 5 years trying to be exactly what he was because I thought that's what strength meant. His hand reached toward her, not quite touching, but the gesture was there. You showed me different. Showed me that strength can be gentle. That power used to heal is worth more than power used to dominate. And I was too broken to accept it. Too afraid of becoming something my father would have called weak. So what changed? Selena's voice was barely a whisper. I almost lost you. Almost lost the baby. Almost destroyed the only good thing I've ever had in my life because I was too proud to question whether I might be wrong. Darius's hand dropped. That kind of failure changes you. Makes you realize that the throne isn't worth anything if you're sitting on it alone. That being feared is hollow, compared to being trusted by one person who sees all your flaws and chooses you anyway. Selena stood frozen, her heart hammering. She'd imagined this conversation 1,000 times during the long months in the borderlands. Imagined Darius realizing his mistake, apologizing, begging her to come back. But the reality was different, messier, full of pain that couldn't be fixed with words. I don't know if I can trust you again. The admission hurt to speak. Don't know if I can put myself in a position where you have the power to destroy me a second time. I know. And I'm not asking you to forget what I did. Not asking you to forgive me before you're ready. Darius's expression was open in a way she'd never seen, all his carefully constructed walls finally torn down. I'm just asking for the chance to prove I can be different, to show you that the wolf who threw you away isn't the wolf I want to be anymore. And if you fail again, Then you walk away and I live with the consequences. But I have to try, Selena. Have to know whether I'm capable of being the alpha you needed me to be from the start. The candle flickered. Outside the window, dawn was starting to break, pale light creeping across the mountains. Selena looked at Darius lying wounded in a bed too small for him, in a stronghold that belonged to a wolf he'd once exiled, kept alive by the mate he'd betrayed. And she thought about the girl who'd walked into the palace 2 years ago, the one who'd believed love could soften brutal edges, who'd tried so hard to be what an alpha needed that she'd forgotten to be what she needed for herself. That girl was dead, burned away in the frozen borderlands and rebuilt into something harder. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the woman she'd become was strong enough to make choices the girl never could have. I'm not coming back to the palace. Her voice was firm. Not as your wife. Not as some political statement about reuniting the royal family. Darius's expression fell, but he nodded. I understand, but I'm not running anymore either. Selena took a breath. I'll stay in the borderlands. Raise the baby here where it can grow up, seeing that power doesn't have to mean cruelty, that strength can be used to protect instead of dominate. She met his eyes. You want to be part of that? Want to prove you've changed? Then you make the journey. You come to us. You put in the work to rebuild trust instead of expecting it to be handed back because you apologized. And if I do that? If I spend the next year, the next 5 years, proving I'm worthy of being in our child's life, then maybe we see what grows from that. Maybe we build something new that doesn't look like what we had before. Selena's hand moved to her belly, but it has to be built on honesty this time, on you actually doing the work to be different instead of just saying you will. Darius was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, small and genuine and full of something that looked almost like hope. I can do that. A knock at the door interrupted them. Kai entered without waiting for permission, his golden eyes taking in the scene with the kind of knowing look that said he'd probably been listening. The council sent a messenger. They're demanding the Alpha King return to the capital immediately to address the coup attempt and restore order. Tell them he's recovering from near-fatal injuries and will return when he's actually capable of standing without bleeding out. Selena's tone was sharp. And tell them if they have a problem with that, they can come here and try explaining why their rush to get him back is more important than making sure he survives. Kai's mouth curved. I'll phrase it more diplomatically, but the sentiment will carry. He looked at Darius. You're going to have to deal with this eventually. The council, the military, the question of succession now that everyone knows your heir exists. I know. Darius's voice was steady despite the exhaustion. But Selena's right. I need to heal first. Need to be strong enough to tear apart the corruption Cassian built without collapsing halfway through. Kai nodded. You can stay here until you're ready. But understand that my loyalty is to her now, to the baby. If you do anything that threatens their safety, I'll kill you myself and damn the political consequences. Fair enough. The older wolf left. Selena moved back to the chair beside the bed, her body reminding her that she was 7 months pregnant and desperately needed sleep. Darius watched her settle in. You don't have to stay. I'll be fine. I'm not staying for you. I'm staying because this is the only chair in the stronghold that doesn't make my back scream. Selena pulled the blanket around her shoulders. Don't read too much into it. But there was something almost like warmth in her voice. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the possibility of it. The acknowledgement that maybe, with enough time and work and brutal honesty, they could build something worth having. Outside, the sun finished rising over the mountains. A new day in the northern kingdom. One without Cassian's manipulation poisoning it from the inside. One where an exiled Omega had saved the Alpha who'd destroyed her. Not because he deserved it, but because she'd chosen compassion over vengeance. And in doing so, she'd shown him what real strength looked like. The weeks that followed were brutal in different ways. Darius recovered slowly, his alpha healing helping but not erasing the damage Cassian's blade had done. He spent his days resting and his evenings in council with Kai and the borderland wolves, learning how they'd built a society that didn't rely on domination and fear. Selena watched from a distance, focusing on her own preparations. She was 8 months pregnant now, the baby so active she barely slept. Vera helped her gather supplies for the birth, taught her breathing techniques and positions that would make labor easier. The royal guards who'd followed them to the stronghold sent regular reports back to the capital. updates on the king's condition, assurances that he was alive and recovering, careful political language that didn't mention how completely his worldview was being rebuilt by wolves he'd once considered beneath him. 1 month after the battle at Blood Summit, Darius was strong enough to walk without assistance. He found Selena in the library, reading about ancient wolf bloodlines and trying to understand what her child would become. She looked up when he entered, taking in how much healthier he looked. The color had returned to his face. The wound had healed to a scar he'd carry the rest of his life. "You're recovering well, thanks to you." He gestured to the chair across from her. "May I? It's your stronghold too right now." He sat, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Two wolves who'd destroyed each other and somehow survived it. "I've been thinking about what you said, about me coming to you instead of demanding you return." Darius's voice was careful. "About building something new, and I want to start now. Not waiting until the baby's born. Not putting it off until I've dealt with the council." He leaned forward. "I want to be here for the birth. Want to see our child come into the world and know that I didn't abandon either of you a second time." Selena's hand moved to her belly. The baby kicked strong against her palm, like it was weighing in on the decision. "This doesn't fix what you did. I know, and it doesn't mean we're together. Doesn't mean I trust you." "I know that too." Darius met her eyes. "But I'm asking anyway. Because being there for the birth isn't about earning your forgiveness. It's about starting to be the father our child deserves instead of the one I was raised by." Selena thought about her own childhood, about growing up in a small pack where her parents had loved each other openly, where her father had been gentle with her mother even though he was alpha and she was omega, where strength had been defined by how well you protected your family instead of how thoroughly you dominated them. She wanted that for her child. Wanted it to grow up seeing a different model of what alphas could be, and maybe watching Darius try to become that model was worth the risk. "Okay, you can stay for the birth." She held up a hand before he could speak. "But after that, you return to the capital. You deal with your kingdom. You prove to me from a distance that you're serious about changing before we talk about anything more permanent." He nodded. "Thank you." The baby came 3 weeks later, on a night when the northern lights painted the sky in waves of green and gold. Selena's labor started just after sunset, sharp contractions that doubled her over and stole her breath. Vera was there immediately, calm and efficient, guiding her through the early stages. Kai brought supplies. The other borderland wolves maintained respectful distance, giving her space but staying close enough to help if needed. And Darius stayed by her side through all of it. He held her hand when the contractions peaked, wiped sweat from her forehead during the brief moments between waves of pain, spoke to her in a low voice, words of encouragement that were clumsy but genuine. 10 hours in, Selena screamed at him to get out, that this was his fault, that she hated him and every decision that had led to this moment. He stayed anyway. And 12 hours after it started, their son came into the world screaming with the kind of fury that promised he'd inherited both his parents' stubbornness. Vera cut the cord and cleaned him quickly, then placed the baby on Selena's chest. She looked down at the tiny life she'd protected for 9 months and felt something crack open in her chest. Not breaking, expanding, making room for a love so fierce it actually hurt. The baby had dark hair like Darius, gray eyes that would probably change color as he grew. And when he opened his mouth to cry, Selena felt the wash of ancient wolf power roll off him in a wave that made every wolf in the stronghold freeze. Kai appeared in the doorway, his golden eyes wide. "That's not normal newborn strength." "No, it's not." Selena looked at Darius, saw the same awe and fear reflected in his face. "Our son is exactly what you said he'd be. A catalyst. Something that will either unite the packs or shatter them. Then we make sure it's the former." Darius reached out slowly, asking permission. When Selena nodded, he touched the baby's hand with one finger. The infant gripped it immediately, tiny fingers wrapping around Darius's much larger one. And Selena watched something transform in the Alpha King's expression. All the walls he'd spent decades building, all the carefully controlled distance he maintained to protect himself from weakness, it crumbled in an instant. He looked at his son with absolute vulnerability. "What do we name him?" Selena had thought about this for months, had considered names from her family line, from pack history, from the ancient stories Kai had shared about the first wolves. "Leon. It means fierce protector." She looked down at the baby. because he's going to need to be fierce, going to need to protect himself and everyone who depends on him. But he's also going to need to be a protector, someone who uses strength to defend instead of dominate. Darius's throat worked. Leon Thorne. It's perfect. They stayed like that for a long time, the three of them in a small room in a borderland stronghold, far from the palace and politics and everything that had tried to destroy them. And for the first time in longer than Selena could remember, she felt something like peace. 1 year later, Selena stood in the Northern Palace throne room, wearing a crown made of moonstone and silver. The journey from that night in the stronghold to this moment had been brutal. Darius had returned to the capital and spent months tearing apart the corruption Cassian had built, exposing the wolves who'd been bought, restructuring the guard, implementing new laws that protected lower-ranking wolves from the kind of abuse that had been standard for generations. He'd visited the borderlands every 2 weeks, spent time with Leon, proved through action instead of words that he was serious about being different. And slowly, incrementally, Selena had started to trust him again, not the blind trust of the girl who'd first walked into the palace. Something harder, built on seeing him fail and get back up, watching him make mistakes and actually learn from them, witnessing him choose vulnerability over control when every instinct screamed at him to be the alpha his father had raised. 6 months ago, he'd asked her to marry him again. Not a political arrangement this time, a real partnership built on equals. She'd said yes, but with conditions. She would be queen in truth. Not a decorative consort, she'd have equal say in policy decisions. She'd continue her healing work with the lower packs. And she'd make sure Leon grew up understanding that power was a responsibility, not a right. Darius had agreed to everything. Now she stood beside him on the dais as the High Elder performed the ceremony they'd been denied a year ago. The Moon Bond ceremony. Except this time it was real. This time Darius looked at her like she was the only wolf in the room. This time when they spoke the vows, both of them meant every word. The court watched in silence. Many of these wolves had seen her dragged from this very room in disgrace, had believed she was a traitor, had done nothing when Darius threw her away. Now they watched her crowned as their queen, and there wasn't a damn thing they could do about it. Selena felt Leon's presence in her awareness. He was with Kai and Vera in a private room, 9 months old and already showing signs of the power he'd carry his whole life, already making grown wolves nervous with how easily he commanded attention without trying. The ceremony concluded. Darius took her hand and they faced the court together. The Alpha King's voice carried to every corner of the hall. Today marks the beginning of a new era for the Northern Kingdom. One where strength is measured by how well we protect our vulnerable instead of how thoroughly we dominate them. Where Omegas have the same rights and opportunities as Alphas. Where lower-ranking wolves can challenge injustice without fear of execution. He looked at Selena. My queen has shown me what real power looks like, and I intend to spend the rest of my rule making sure this kingdom reflects her vision instead of my father's brutality. The court murmured, some approving, some uncertain, some clearly opposed but smart enough to keep their mouths shut. Selena stepped forward, and her voice was steel wrapped in silk. I was exiled from this palace for crimes I didn't commit. I spent months hiding in the borderlands while pregnant because the systems meant to protect me failed completely. She let that sink in. I could have let bitterness consume me, could have raised my son to hate this kingdom and everyone in it. Instead, I chose to build something better. She gestured to the court, to the Shi'it. All of you have a choice now too. You can cling to the old ways. You can resist change because it threatens your comfort. Or you can help us create a kingdom where wolves like me don't have to choose between survival and integrity. Where children like Leon grow up in a world that values them for who they are, instead of what rank they were born into. The silence was absolute. Then one wolf stepped forward, one of the younger council members who'd opposed Cassian's coup. Her voice rang clear. I stand with the queen. Another wolf joined her. Then another. Within minutes, half the court had stepped forward in support. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to start changing things. That night, after the ceremonies and political maneuvering were finished, Selena stood in the royal chambers with Leon in her arms and Darius beside her. They looked out the window at the capital spread below, at thousands of wolves whose lives would be shaped by the choices they made. You think we can actually do this? Change an entire kingdom? Darius's arm wrapped around her waist, careful and reverent. I think we already started. You survived what should have broken you. I learned that strength isn't about domination, and our son exists as proof that the old ways don't have to define the future. He pressed a kiss to her temple. The rest is just details. Leon made a small sound, his gray eyes, now shifting toward the gold of ancient wolf, tracking the northern lights visible through the window. Selena felt his power humming just beneath the surface, waiting for the day he'd be old enough to fully access it. Her son, her choice, her future built from the ashes of everything that had tried to destroy her. She thought about this girl who'd discovered she was pregnant on the night her world ended, who'd run into the frozen borderlands with nothing but survival instinct and desperate hope, who'd learned to fight and heal and become something no one expected. That girl would be proud of the woman standing here now, scarred but whole, broken but rebuilt stronger, betrayed but no longer bitter. Just a wolf who'd learned that the greatest strength wasn't in refusing to be hurt, it was in choosing to heal anyway, in building something beautiful from the wreckage, in believing that change was possible even when everything said it wasn't. Selena looked at Darius and saw him watching her with an expression that had taken a year of brutal honesty to earn. Love. Real love. The kind built on seeing someone's worst and choosing them anyway. Tell me we're going to be okay. He smiled. We're going to fight. Going to fail sometimes. Going to make mistakes that hurt each other. That's not reassuring. But we're also going to keep choosing each other. Keep doing the work. Keep building something worth the pain it took to get here. Darius's hand found hers. And that's all any of us can do. Show up. Try. Be honest when we fail. Leon yawned, tiny and perfect. Selena felt her heart expand to hold all of this. The past that had scarred her. The present that challenged her. The future that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. Outside, the northern lights danced across the sky. Inside, a family that shouldn't exist stood together against a world that had tried to prevent them. And in that moment, Selena understood something fundamental. Power wasn't about domination or control or fear. Real power was choosing love when you'd earned the right to choose hate. Real power was healing when breaking would have been easier. Real power was standing in the ruins of everything you'd lost and building something better from what remained. She'd survived the Alpha King's betrayal, and she'd done more than survive. She'd become exactly what the kingdom needed, what her son needed, what she needed to be for herself. A wolf who'd learned that the strongest thing you could do was keep your heart open even after it had been shattered, because that's how you changed the world. One brutal, honest, beautiful choice at a time.